I thought this got sorted out.
I
I can't. I mean, I'm quite surprised on many levels actually that this is still a problem.
I actually had somebody speaking to Elvis in the earlier show. I don't know, man. I don't think this is necessary.
No, I think I was actually going to use the same word, unnecessary.
It's
Absolutely.
so unnecessary, so unnecessary. And finally, Stephen, the Free State Education will be looking at the impact of a shortage of teachers and the length it takes to appoint new educators in the province. It would seem that the province is dealing with quite a chronic shortage of educators there, and the turnaround times when it comes to hiring new teachers, even if it's SGB post, it's quite problematic and thus affecting the learner teacher ratio in the Free State schools. So we'll be definitely looking at that.
Leander Mohammed.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. We'll be listening on the radio 20 minutes after 6.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Let's have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane partly cloudy, 17 and 32. Johannesburg partly cloudy, 16 and 30. Vereeniging partly cloudy, 17 and 32. Mbombela cloudy, morning drizzle, becoming partly cloudy in the afternoon. Isolated showers and thunder showers, 20 and 27. Polokwane cloudy in the morning, otherwise partly cloudy. Isolated afternoon thunder showers, 20 and 28. Mahakeng fine, partly cloudy in the afternoon, 18 and 35. Vryburg fine, partly cloudy in the afternoon. Isolated thunder showers, 18 and 37. Mangaung fine, 17 and 36. Kimberley fine, partly cloudy in the afternoon, 16 and 39. Uppington fine, becoming partly cloudy in the afternoon. This is the highest temperature I've read out this year. In Uppington today, the low is 22, the high is 43. Cape Town, cloudy in the morning with fog, becoming fine, a light and variable wind, 20 and 26. George, cloudy in the morning with fog, becoming fine, light and variable wind, 16 and 32. Gqeberha, morning mist, otherwise fine, a light northeasterly wind, 18 and 30. East London, fine, becoming partly cloudy, a moderate to fresh northeasterly, 19 and 29. eThekwini, cloudy, morning light rain, becoming partly cloudy, a moderate easterly wind, 21 and 28. Richards Bay, cloudy, with morning light rain, becoming partly cloudy, a moderate southeasterly wind, 21 and 29. And Pietermaritzburg, cloudy in the morning with fog, light rain, becoming partly cloudy, a low of 18, a high of 28.
Eskom understands that electricity is an integral part of running a business. However, electricity demand is currently higher than supply, and energy efficiency is critical. Businesses are encouraged to reduce consumption between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. by not leaving electrical equipment on standby mode, as well as turning off unnecessary lighting. We can reduce load shedding by working together. Every kilowatt counts.
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da-da. We buy cars, we buy cars. Da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-dun-da-da-da-da.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international news.
22 after 6, good morning. Russian forces have now claimed the Ukrainian town of Avdiivka after a battle which saw the Russian flag being hoisted over a massive coking plant that produces coal in that area. It seems to be the first big Russian advance in Ukraine for several months. Ukraine says it pulled its soldiers out of the area after months of fighting because it didn't want its soldiers to be surrounded by Russian forces. Dennis Reva is a researcher at the Institute for Security Studies. Dennis, good morning and thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
This must be significant. I mean, this is surely progress by the Russians in Ukraine and the first for some time.
I think the importance is more symbolic. I don't think there's any strategic value to this town, not at this point of the war, but of course symbolically, it's a very important victory for Putin. Ahead of the anniversary of the invasion, about a month away from the elections in Russia, where Putin is really struggling to show the results of this war. I think it's a very important symbolic victory for Russia.
How were the Russians able to do it? I mean, do they just have too many soldiers, too many resources? It was one of those sort of victories for Russia's size compared to that of Ukraine?
It definitely played a role. From what we can see, from what the experts point, Russia threw everything it had to achieve this victory without sparing any cost. But of course, the the challenges that Ukraine is facing in terms of the support, material support from the U.S. and some other challenges in Europe have also played a role. I think Ukraine could have continued holding the town, and there were discussions about Ukraine trying to achieve the symbolic or deny the symbolic victory, take it away from Putin. But it seems that they've decided otherwise, and probably it is best for the soldiers, definitely, on the ground, that Ukraine decided to move the troops out.
So if we see Russia making progress here, and this, I must just point out, is the middle of winter, so you don't expect anyone to really make much progress in the middle of winter of the Northern Hemisphere. So if Russia's done this, can we expect them to maybe make progress in other areas too, or do you think the strategic situation is different in other places?
The situation is certainly different, but they will most likely attempt to make progress, of course. I think now that Ukraine is struggling with some of the supplies, especially in terms of artillery shells, now would be the opportunity for Russia to try to make the advances. In fact, they've attempted to make some advances in Zaporizhia, to claim back the land that they've lost during the Ukrainian counteroffensive last year. So we will certainly see more attempts moving forward, and I think a lot will depend on the support that the European Union at this point will provide to Ukraine, because I think U.S. is their political leads went in a recession for the next few weeks, so the process is delayed that side.
I mean, I was going to ask, this has all been about the U.S. The Republicans there have refused to vote for more military aid for Ukraine. And the EU has not provided nearly as much support to Ukraine as the Americans have. So the Ukrainians probably in a tough spot at the moment.
It depends. Again, I think some European Union countries have provided tremendous support to Ukraine, especially in correlation to their GDP. But the major powers, especially France, I think, have maybe lagged behind a little bit. There is a lot of bureaucracy involved. For instance, we know that there was a reluctance to purchase artillery shells outside of the European Union, and this reluctance was driven by the producers within the EU sort of putting demands, asking the European politicians to rather prioritize local suppliers instead of actually supplying the materials to Ukraine. It is a challenging situation, but I don't think it's drastic. I think we'll have to wait and see how the situation develops on the ground. I think Ukraine can hold the ground at this moment in time. It will still be difficult for Russian forces to move forward. It will take a lot of resources and it will result in a lot of losses. But obviously, Ukraine cannot at this point counterattack. It's out of its reach.
Denise Reaver, thank you. The researcher at the Institute for Security Studies. Really appreciate the time. 27 minutes after 6.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
The Nedbank Cup, the last 32 tonight.
Yeah, it's time to switch our attention to the action that's on display. 7 p.m. kickoff will see Mamelodi Sundowns travelling to La Masia at Dobsonville Stadium. And at the same time, SuperSport United will take on Cape Town City at Lucas Moripe Stadium. Now, Masat Sansa have conceded in each of their last 15 matches. But here's their coach, Gavin Hunt, looking ahead.
The first round of the Cup is obviously it's not an easy draw for both teams, I think. So, both competitive teams, both lying with the same amount of points in the league. Both of us, I think it's a tough draw, and we'll approach it. We play them next week in the league again, so, let's see if we can, it's a bit of a run of games now,
Meanwhile, Steve Compella has left troubled Morocco Swallows just over 7 months after assuming the head coaching role at the Soweto club. His departure from the Dube Birds, who have well-documented financial and player strike issues, was announced by the club yesterday. Elsewhere, Michael Beale has parted ways with Sunderland, just 9 weeks in charge. Beale oversaw only 4 wins in 12 games after succeeding Tony Mowbray and leaves the Black Cats 10th in the championship, 4 points off the playoff positions. Now, Beale struggled to win many of Sunderland's fans during his short time in charge at the Stadium of Light. Also, Roy Hodgson has stepped down as manager of Premier League strugglers Crystal Palace just hours before their crucial clash with relegation rivals Everton. Former England boss Hodgson has been under fire from Palace fans amid the club side heading towards the relegation zone. The 76-year-old was taken to hospital for tests on Thursday after falling ill. That match last night ended in a 1-1 draw. Now, rugby news. The Bulls have penned utility back Devon Williams on a permanent deal that will see the 31-year-old remain at Loftus Versfeld for the next 3 years. Now, he was initially on loan from the Pumas in a deal that would have run until the beginning of the Currie Cup campaign. He'll now remain in the capital all the way through to 2027. And finally, tennis action. Pavel Kotov defeated Italy's Lorenzo Sonego in straight sets, and that's to reach the second round of the Qatar Open. Meanwhile, former world number 1 Victoria Azarenka eased past Arantxa Rus of the Netherlands in the first round of the Dubai Masters. More sport on Sunrise. Headlines top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. You with SAFM leading the conversation. We'll talk about Transnet, the search for a new CEO, and cadre deployment. That's in the next half hour. No load shedding for the moment. Stage 2 later. Good morning at 6:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, e-tolls will officially be switched off from the 31st of March. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi made the announcement at the State of the Province address in Johannesburg last night. Change Starts Now leader Roger Jardine has promised voters that the new political movement will tackle unemployment, fight crime and ensure that there are sufficient healthcare facilities for South Africans. The party launched its charter yesterday ahead of the national elections later this year. And authorities say the foul odor hanging over Cape Town originates from a docked cattle carrier. Officials from the National Council of the SPCA went on board the Al Kuwaiti live export vessel, from which a strong smell that has travelled from the harbour to the CBD emanated. I'll have details on these and other stories at 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good news for motorists coming out of Pretoria. The big crash on the M1 South after Rigel Avenue. That is being cleared. There were 3 lanes closed for recovery of that, but it's all out of the way and traffic is moving normally. Joburg's N3, a little bit heavier than you'd like. Traffic queuing up from Elan's Interchange all the way through to Galuli's this morning. That run past Cement Factory and through the roadworks at Van Buren is very busy. Durban, M19, Claremont, New Germany through to Reservoir Hills open. No repeat of yesterday's protest blockage. The Huntstepman Highway, very heavy today. Motorists stuck in a queue of traffic coming from Clarva to Shell Cross on your way through to Wiltshire Road. That's a delay heading up towards the Pinetown area. And Cape Town, very misty conditions. The closer you get into the city centre, the heavier that mist becomes. So drive carefully if you encounter that mist. And the M7, R300, both of those routes coming out of Mitchell's Plain, slow as you line up towards the Philippine Samora Michelle side.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray Machlaka, good morning.
Good morning. Hi there.
Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, both US and Asian markets are mostly down. It is only China's stock market that is up. Investors are optimistic about a recovery in China's economy, boosted by consumer spending and the tourism industry. China's stock market was closed last week for the Lunar New Year celebration, and this holiday celebration period has boosted tourism revenues in China by 47% compared with last year. So in Asian markets, China's Shanghai Composite is up 0.2%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down 0.3%, and Japan's Nikkei is also down 0.4%. Before the US market opens later today, the US futures market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones, and S&P futures are each down 0.3%. And in the currency market, there is a further weakness against the dollar compared to the rand. The local currency is 18.98.
And Anglo-American Platinum, they're going to lay off 3,700 workers, sure.
Yeah, Anglo American Platinum has started a retrenchment process that might affect up to 3,700 workers. This is about 17% of Anglo American Platinum's total workforce. The retrenchment process is aimed at cutting costs worth 5 billion rand at Anglo American's platinum business. Also, Anglo American Platinum is not profitable as it used to be. Last year, the price of platinum group metals fell by 35%, and the global demand for platinum group metals was lower, mainly due to the slowdown in China's economy. All of these factors have resulted in Anglo American Platinum's profits to fall by 71% in 2023.
And then Northern Platinum also expecting a big drop in earnings.
Yeah, Northern Platinum is another mining company facing financial difficulties, and Northern Platinum expects its profits to decrease by 73% to reach 2.4 billion rand during the 6 months ending December 2023. The same global economic factors that have negatively impacted Anglo American Platinum have also impacted Northern Platinum.
Ray McClark, thank you, Ray. Of course, back in an hour, more business news through the day here on SAFM. 25 minutes.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
25 minutes to 7, I was saying. Russ Advocate, Sipho Mantula, good morning.
Steve, over refreshing morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
What's happening with the opposition leader in Ethiopia, Raila Odinga? He's announced his candidacy to be chair of the African Union Commission.
Stephen, remember, being the chair of the African Union Commission, it means that you are a chief executive officer, you are a legal representative of the AU, you are dealing with administrative and financial matters, pushing also the objectives of the AU. Now, you will understand, Stephen, that position is held by the Chad citizen Musa Faki, who will now vacate that position towards the end of the year of 2024. Now, Obasanjo, the former president of West Africa, has been in Kenya engaging Raila Odinga to say that you need to stand for a candidacy for East Africa. So they are pushing this candidate for Raila Odinga as part of East Africa. Remember, you had West Africa, you have Southern Africa. Now they are pushing the East Africa candidate to lead the African Union. And Raila Odinga used this role being an AU envoy at some point between 2018 to 2023, dealing with the infrastructure aspect of the African continent.
And then in South Sudan, the head of the UN peacekeeping mission there, that person is there to have a look at preparations for the elections.
Stephen, remember that the South Sudan is also having an impact of the crisis that is in North Sudan, in Khartoum, as well as Abyei region and Rap area, where there have been some communal conflicts. But the UN has been there as a peacekeeping mission. They are trying to look at the issue of the peace process, the Addis Ababa roadmap. They are looking also at the question of the state of readiness. Are the upcoming elections towards the end of the year, is the government of Salva Kiir ready to conduct those elections peacefully since 2011? Remember that there's been long, Stephen, since they separated from North Sudan. They never had any independence, any election. Just after 2013, there was this crisis between Riek Machar and Salva Kiir. But now the UN is giving all its support to South Sudan.
And then in Guinea-Conakry, the ruling junta there decreeing the dissolution of the government. Getting very serious with all of these military governments at the moment.
Dissolution, Stephen, after almost 2021 military coup that took place under Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya. Now, yesterday they gave no reason for the dissolution, no date for the announcing of a new government, but General Amara Tamara, who was announcing that through the social media, raising that the government will be run by cabinet directors, secretary generals, and deputy until the government is put into place. And remember, they said that they will elect the civilians by the end of 2024. So we'll watch and see what will happen in Guinea-Conakry under Colonel Mamadou Doumbouya, who has to definitely even go for the elections because there's been 3 years since that military coup.
And then Kenya and Nigeria, the presidents of those two countries, William Ruto and Bola Tinubu, what do they have in common?
They have one thing in common. The other one, they say, is a flying president. That is the hustler, William Ruto. The other, they say, is a tourist in chief. They say they've traveled, since they came into power. They've been flying, Stephen. They've been moving from one summit to the other, Italy-Africa summit, the G20, the Dubai, all these conferences that have been happening. And others are now lamenting about their trips, saying that if you look at Bola Tinubu, since his inauguration, Stephen, last year, he has already made 14 trips. William Ruto, since he came into power in August 2022, he has made 50 trips outside the country. And others are saying they are not like the former president of Tanzania, who never traveled outside Africa in his 6 years of office. We are talking about John Pombe Magufuli. So it is worrying, Stephen, when there are these lamentations saying that the travelers in chief, both the president of Kenya as well as of Nigeria. It is worrying, Stephen, because they are traveling for economic reasons to gather funds, investment money for the country, but others are saying you are just tourists.
And then you're taking us back to this day, the 20th of February, 1925.
Stephen, he will be 99 years, but he passed away in 1985. A writer, a political activist. His father was an anti-apartheid activist. We are talking of Justin Alexandra Laguma. Was born in District 6 in Cape Town on this day. We know his father was coming from Cuba, but they were also active in the struggle of the African National Congress. Hence, Alex Laguma passed in 1985 as a member of the African National Congress in England. Asante Sana SG, as was leading the conversation, SAFM.
Ross Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you. 20 minutes to 7, back tomorrow.
Across South Africa, online and on radio. SAFM, let's talk.
All right, you know the number 086 000 2032. Conversations around the two State of the Province addresses last night. The Western Cape, Alan Winde, the Premier there for the DA, pushing ahead, it seems, with the sort of the provincial powers bill. The Gauteng Premier, Panyaza Lesufi, disruptions there between the EFF and the Panyaza, the crime prevention wardens. But in the end, Lesufi promising more action against crime there. Also, cadre deployment, a big issue this morning. Well, in the middle of all of that, a series of announcements yesterday by the new political party, Change Starts Now. It said if it came into power, it would create a social solidarity fund that would see a tax increase on people earning around 1.8 million rand a year or more to create a fund that would be used to fix infrastructure. The party also says it would try and create millions of jobs. Mark Hayward is a person you've heard as a sort of social activist, but he's joined Change Starts Now. He's now the political strategy principal there. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and thank you for having me.
What for you are the main points of the policies you would implement if you came into power?
Well, Stephen, as you've said, I want to step back a little bit and say, as we sit here and talk, in South Africa, everything is broken and everything is breaking. We look on a daily basis at Eskom, but we're not looking at what is happening to our water infrastructure, for example. So we have to decide as a political party, and we have to decide as a country, where do you start in trying to fix things? And what we've done in what we call the Change Charter, a manifesto of hope, is say there are two particular areas we have to zoom in on, and we have to zoom in on fast. The first is meeting the greatest human need. We cannot postpone the social crisis that exists in our country whilst we wait for some type of elusive economic growth. There are 20 million people, for example, who are hungry. There are 25% of our kids who are stunted. But side by side, in parallel, simultaneously with that, we have to work out where is the greatest economic needs. And that is where we come to this question of fixing critical infrastructure which is needed for growth. But I think what differentiates the thinking that we have embarked upon is that it's not difficult to make a very, very long list of things that need to be done in our country. The question is, how do you enable them? How actually, if the voters say, yes, we like your proposals, do you put them into effect? And that brings us to the absolutely critical question of financing. And as you've said, our message, and it may not be popular to begin with, but I hope that we can persuade people, is that We are in a war. We are coming out of a war. We need exceptional measures. And on that basis, we propose creating a special fund, finding 1.5 trillion rand to go into that fund, making sure that fund is protected against corruption and theft and maladministration, and targeting that money at those areas of urgent need. And so that is the context in which we're proposing a wealth tax, increased taxes on high earners, and so on. But it's not a standalone. That's what I want to say to you.
Okay, I mean, I understand that. Now, as I understand it, the proposal is that this would be a temporary tax. Many people would have to pay this temporary tax, would be very suspicious that one day it would just become permanent because, that's convenient.
Well, you have to trust us. I mean, this is not an ANC government that we're proposing. It's not an EFF government we're proposing. Sure. It's a government that is made up of civil society leaders with integrity, of business leaders with integrity, and it is a calculation that says we need to do this for 3 years. And we also say to people that doing nothing actually will cost more. It will cost more financially. It will cost more in terms of what is drawn out of business and society. If we allow another explosion in this country, if we allow our water infrastructure to collapse, those are not costless implosions. They have a huge cost. So we have to reckon with the state of the country to be if we are to be serious.
We're expecting elections probably towards the end of May. You started only as a political party, November, December last year. Do you really believe you're going to be able to make an impact, to stand apart from all of the other political parties and many of the other new political formations as well?
Stephen, you mentioned in your introduction, I've been working in social movements for 25 years. I have seen and I know how to build movements. I'm already seeing the impact that we are having. We've spent a week working in Soweto as we prepared for the launch of the Change Charter yesterday. I see that there are millions of people who have not made their minds up, who are unhappy with what is on offer at the moment with the traditional, official, big, established parties. This is now a contest of ideas, and if you can win the contest of ideas, and if you can persuade people that you are not like all the other politicians and basically crooks trying to get into power so that you can divert resources to benefit yourself, then I think that there is potential. I wouldn't pretend or suggest for a second that it's easy. I can tell you it's not, but it's necessary because this is such a high stakes election, and it's an election where all people of good need to vote, need to register, and need to participate actively if we are to save our country. That's the way that I look at it.
Mark Hayward, thank you. Political strategy principal at Change starts now. 13 minutes to 7.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
There's been consistent reporting over the last few days that the acting CEO of Transnet, Michelle Phillips, has been selected by the board to take over as CEO after the resignation of Portia Derby from Transnet last year. But it seems that the Public Enterprises Minister, Stephen Grootes, has not yet decided who to recommend to Cabinet. As you know, Transnet has huge problems, and that's having a big impact on our economy. Mining companies can't move minerals to the coast to export them. Our ports have problems, leading to all of the mess on the roads near Richards Bay. Meanwhile, of course, yesterday the ANC handed over its cadre deployment committee records to the DA. It's been confirmed over the years that this deployment committee has played a role in the appointment of CEOs of Transnet in the past, and particularly with the appointment of Siyabonga Gama, who since has been charged with involvement in state capture. Well, let's speak now to Atunkosi Plaiki, the spokesperson for the National Transport Union, UNTU. Atunkosi, good morning, and thank you for your time this morning.
Good morning to you, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners, and thank you for having UNTU again on SAFM.
In a way, the situation now at Transnet encapsulates so many of the issues in our society. There's cadre deployment, there's the big problems at Transnet, and in the middle of it all is this vacancy for a CEO. How do you think this position should be filled?
As Untu, I think, first of all, you want to say that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's why in all our meetings with the minister and the board, we have said that we do not want any political meddling. Transnet does not belong to any political party. Government is the shareholder or the sole shareholder at Transnet, and that government has appointed a capable board unless they have appointed people that they think that are not capable of making these decisions or making these big decisions at Transnet. So in our meetings with the minister, we have gone in to say that we need someone that has institutional experience at Transnet, and we feel that is important. So we are very worried when we see reports that there has been already political meddling in this process.
So you want Michelle Phillips to take over?
Well, Stephen, I think as Labour, it would be hypocritical of us to say that we don't want any political meddling or we don't want any political pressure or influence. And then as Labour, we still say that this is who we recommend as a candidate. That is not our place. As I've said, that we have had meetings with the minister whereby we have presented our stance to say that we need a candidate that is going to be like this, and we need a candidate that is going to have the experience together with the qualifications in order to turn around Transnet.
Okay, so for you, it's really about the board. If government has appointed a board, then they should listen to the board. They should basically allow the board to do its work. For you, it's about that principle?
Definitely. And I think we said in our statement that the board needs to be given the autonomy or the space to make these decisions without any political pressure. I mean, the board has already presented a turnaround strategy to the minister, which seems to be working. So that means we do have a capable board that's able to make these decisions. Then why not then give this board the room and the space to make these decisions and then give the minister the right candidate that will lead Transnet?
So you as UNTRU have decided not to, and I understand your principle, you're not going to state a preference, and many people are probably nodding their heads when they hear you say that. There are other unions at Transnet. One of them is SATAWU, which is part of COSATU. I realise they're sort of rivals and sort of allies of yours. Do you think they would you prefer them to also not have a preference because they would go to COSATU, COSATU would go to the ANC, etc.? Would you prefer it if they also followed your principle?
I think SATAWU and UNTU have very different founding principles, and also to remember that UNTU is a political union. So we cannot have an opinion on whether SATAWU then should put their weight behind a candidate, but I don't think it's appropriate to say that that we're giving the board the space and we're giving the board the autonomy to make these decisions, and then we put our weight behind a certain candidate. What we can do and what we have done previously is go into these meetings and then be an influence basically before this process was started to say that this is what Transnet was doing before maybe the previous leadership problems that we had. So maybe let's go back to the basics and let's hire people with the experience, let's hire people with institutional knowledge that know exactly what they're doing, and also they will also know which executives to put in which operating divisions based on their own experience of what Transnet needs at the moment.
Aden Corsi Plaiki, thank you. Communications Officer for the United National Transport Union. 8 minutes to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. The N1 South to Rigel Avenue leaving Pretoria is backed up. There was a big crash early between Rigel and the R21. That scene's being cleared, but it looks like it's replaced by something just around the Rigel Avenue exit coming through from Atterbury Road. It's all fairly heavy. The problem on Joburg's N3 North this morning is a broken down truck inside Galuli's. It's a side tipper that's broken down as you come off the N3 North and get through Galuli's onto the N12. So that's your pinch point, and the traffic backlogging all the way through to Elands Interchange. It's a heavy one if you're coming from Albert and Germiston. The N3 absolutely heavingly busy. Make sure you've got plenty of time to get through that. If you're coming from the south for flight connections at the airport via Galulish, you might want to, in fact, take an alternative route through. Durban, the Hunstedman Highway looking fairly slow this morning from Shellcross and Klaarwater. Big traffic up to Wiltshire Road on your way slowly towards Pinetown. And Cape Town, bit of mist around the city centre, City Bowl region. The closer you get to town, the heavier that traffic gets and the heavier the mist gets as well. So N2 inbound from the airport's full. The N1 from Belleville, Brackenfell full down towards the Cooper interchange. Both of those highways really busy. The M5 is quite slow going as well. Going to pick up the queue at Ottery all the way through to Buckley Road in the Maitland area. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Keeping up with your TV license balance inquiries is now simpler than ever. No more waiting in queues. No more phone calls. Just SMS your ID or TV license account number to 44210 and secure your legal viewing fast and simple. Standard SMS rates will be charged. Terms and conditions apply. TV licenses. Pay yours. Make a difference.
The Red Devils have a responsibility to ensure there's happiness at Old Trafford.
Swung in dangerously. What a header. Scott McTominay.
However, the Cottagers have an agenda to disrupt that plan.
Swings it in. There it is. It's 3-1. It's Rodrigo Muniz again.
This is the Premier League. Manchester United FC faces Fulham FC on Saturday, 24 February at 4:30 p.m. Live on S3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag we love it here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Real savings, real benefits. Here's what real clients say about OUTsurance.
My name is Alan. I'm 71 years of age and I live in Douglasdale. I'm paying 554 Rand a month for my 2022 Nissan Magnite.
Want a car insurance premium that'll blow your mind? SMS out to 30754 now for a quote. It's quick, it's easy, and it could save you hundreds of rands every month. Here's Amy.
To anyone who has not reached out to OUTsurance, what are you doing? Reach out today.
Blow your mind, not your paycheck. SMS out to 30754 and see for yourself why OUTsurance was voted Best Car Insurer 2023 by the Star and Pretoria newsreaders. Here's Yusuf.
It just shows that OUTsurance is top of the tops when it comes to insurers.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's, and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
4 minutes to 7, good morning. Several warnings this morning that the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, may have to announce an increase in tax somewhere to make up for the revenue shortfall government has experienced. Some estimates suggesting up to 15 billion rand or so will be needed to plug the gap. Of course, it may depend on sort of how you look at the numbers. Professor Keith Engel is the CEO of the SA Institute of Taxation. Professor Engel, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, I think there's definitely a concern. Go right ahead.
Do we know how much money the minister needs to find and where he could get it from?
Yeah, well, look, that's the problem. It's where can you get it from? So right now you're in the middle of the election year. So the opportunity or the desire for tax increases now is very, very little. My feeling is he's going to have to take it from the expenditure side. There's no way he can get some quick money. The only way he can do that is through the VAT. And in an election year, very doubtful.
And the problem with that is that everyone is affected, not quite equally, but the poor pay and the rich. And that was probably in our society a bad idea.
Yeah, look, I don't frankly think raising the VAT is a good idea. I think there comes a point where government has enough money and they've got to just do what they can with what they have. So I'm actually in favor of cutting expenditure, but that maybe I'm taking that personally. But, I mean, yes, the quick the thing is you need money quickly. So the only way to do it quickly is through the VAT. Other things take at least a year and a half, and that's just too long.
So even if you increased income tax on higher earners, richer people, or any kind of wealth tax, that would take a year to get. You would only get that this time next year.
Well, that's right. If you wanted to have like a wealth tax, that'd probably take 2 years. If you're talking about increasing the rates, taxing dividends and putting the rate up from above 45, the problem is you're going to get very little. They tried that before, and they got a lot less than expected, and you're getting to the point where you're going to drive people out of the system. So that really isn't very effective at this point. And instead, a wealth tax is at least 2 years away.
Okay, so you talk about cutting expenditure. That's unpopular too in an election year, and we've already seen people in the health sector very, very upset. Nothing correctly about this. There's a huge discussion around whether or not social grants should be increased. I mean, the demand for greater expenditure is absolutely huge. I don't know if cutting expenditure is politically viable or just viable, actually, at the moment either.
No, that's a very good point. I think what you try to do is you're not going to cut the grants. You're not cut stuff that people can see immediately. But what the government has been doing for a long time is you cut the services. You just cut back on them slowly. It's like you don't maintain the roads as much. You don't spend money on that infrastructure. You just keep delaying it. The problem is, or you borrow at the parastatal level, which is unfortunately what the world is doing. They're just kind of hiding their costs or delaying for things like that. And then what they do is they just get more debt. My feeling at the end of the day was you're just going to have more debt.
Okay, I mean, so in other words, probably the upshot of this budget, and for years we've been saying it's the most difficult budget in years, and here we are again saying it's the most difficult budget in years. The upshot is that all that's happening slowly is that the train crash gets moved slightly further down the road and will probably get worse when we finally get there from a debt point of view.
Unfortunately, that sounds like the way, and sadly, internationally, governments just have no political will. And at that point, they just keep pushing it down the road. You see the debt levels in a number of countries like the UK, US, Japan, and a lot of these modern, European countries. The debt just keeps growing because people don't have that political will. So they try to do soft things in the background, but there is no desire for cutting or for raising taxes. And right now, unfortunately, I think COVID really hurt us. We really were put back at a point where I'm not sure how easy is it to recover. So his hope is to just keep playing with the numbers a little bit. We'll improve the debt situation a few years down the road, just like you said.
Professor Keith Engel, thank you very much indeed, CEO at the SA Institute of Taxation. Well, unfortunately, we'll find out tomorrow what will be in the budget. Coming up, cadre deployment, we'll talk about that, the latest investigations into PRASA and Home Affairs, and particularly focus a little bit on the Passenger Rail Agency of SA. You're with SFM leading the conversation. It's Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, Gauteng Premier promises a total shutdown of e-tolls in the province, and South Africa to make oral submissions before the ICJ. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. E-tolls will officially be switched off from the 31st of March. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi made the announcement at the State of the Province address in Johannesburg. There has been a delay in decommissioning the controversial tolling system since the announcement to scrap the system was made in 2022. Lesufi says the provincial government has met with both finance and transport ministers over the issue.
All of us now have reached an agreement that by the 31st of March this year, the formal process to switch off and de-link e-tolls will begin, and e-tolls will be history in our province. The Minister of Finance will elaborate on this subject.
Meanwhile, Western Cape Premier Alan Winde says they are investing heavily to rid the province of load shedding. He was delivering his State of the Province address at Paarl in the Boerland. Winde also says nearly 2/3 of jobs created in the country over the previous financial year was in the Western Cape. He says this is against the backdrop of accelerated economic growth initiatives. He says their main focus is energy and crime fighting.
Right now, my two big focuses are safety and energy. If we fix those two things, you then enable the economy even further than it's already enabled. So it will always be safety. I suppose that jobs is the second thing. I'm trying to get us energy efficient in the province. 5,700 megawatts are what we need. We only use 4,000 at peak, so we're investing in energy for the future. We need to end load shedding, but that is because of the economy.
Change Starts Now leader Roger Jardine has promised voters that the new political movement will tackle unemployment, fight crime and ensure that there are sufficient healthcare facilities for South Africans. The party launched its charter yesterday ahead of the national elections later this year. Jardine says Change Starts Now has heard the cries of the people of Kliptown who are battling socio-economic ills.
And I am here today to say, we hear you, we see you. This is a community like so many around the country that grapples with high unemployment, inadequate housing, insufficient access to basic services, such as clean water, electricity and sanitation, and limited educational and healthcare facilities. One community member from Eldorado Park told us that the absence of a healthcare facility, a hospital in emergencies in the surrounding area is a real problem. We also spoke about the high crime rates.
The trial of Sfiso Mkwanazi, accused of killing 6 sex workers, will resume today in the Johannesburg High Court, sitting at the Palm Ridge Magistrates Court in Ekurhuleni. The investigating officer, Bongani Mbonambi, is expected to answer questions under cross-examination. 21-year-old Mkwanazi is facing 6 counts of murder and 7 of rape. The bodies of 6 sex workers were discovered at the premises of his father's panel beating business at Rosettenville in October 2022. Authorities say the foul odor hanging over Cape Town originates from a docked cattle carrier. The vessel is carrying 19,000 cattle. Officials from the National Council of the SPCA are currently on board the Al Kuwaiti live export vessel, from which a strong smell that has travelled from the harbour to the CBD is emanating. In a statement, the organisation says they've made an application and were granted a court order to enter the vessel to ensure the welfare of the animals on board, but had to enlist the assistance of the Sea Border SAPS after initially being denied access. The vessel departed for Brazil on the 10th of this month and is currently docked at the Cape Town harbour to load feed for the animals on board before departing for its intended destination in the Middle East. The NSPCA says concerns relating to inadequate hygiene and care apparent they are investigating. And finally, the South African ambassador to the Netherlands, Vusi Madonsela, and the acting chief state law advisor at the Department of International Relations, Andre Stemmet, will present South Africa's oral arguments at the International Court of Justice today. The World Court is hearing oral submissions on Israel's settlements in Palestine and East Jerusalem. The Palestinian Authority has called on the international community to support Palestinians. An emotional submission from the Palestine representative to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, was frank about the challenges facing the Palestinians.
What does international law mean for Palestinian children in Gaza today? It has protected neither them nor their childhood. It has not protected their families or communities. It has not protected their lives or limbs, their hopes or homes. We are a proud and resilient people that has endured more than its share of agony. It is so painful to be Palestinian today.
Recapping your top story, e-tolls will officially be switched off from the 31st of March. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi made the announcement at the State of the Province address in Johannesburg last night. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 7:30.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM sports headlines, it's soccer. Banyana head coach Desiree Ellis has named her final 23 women's squad for the upcoming Olympics qualifier. And Crystal Lake FC chairman Magic Inyalunga has promised to knock out the Soweto Giants Orlando Pirates out of the Nedbank Cup. Let's find out more just before 7:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning, Joburg's N3 from Germiston Alberton off the N12, very heavy up to Galuli's. It's a stationary side tipper inside Galuli's, N3 North on the link to the N12 East, and that's backing traffic N12 from Voortrekker and the N3 from around Rand Airport. So big backlogs. If you're on your way for flight connections at the airport and you're coming in from the south, make sure you've got plenty of time, or you're considering an alternative route to work through that. The N1 South, major backlog alert if you're leaving Pretoria. It's heavy queues down towards the Rigel Avenue exit this morning. Durban's Hunstepin Highway still jam-packed up to Wiltshire Road. The Kwamashu Highway from Mallandella through Duffs Road looking fairly busy. And the Higginson Highway out of Chatsworth. Again, just a busy morning as you line up through Mobeni and down towards the N2. Cape Town, a combination of rain, light rain in parts, and misty conditions. So all the highway networks are really heavy. The M1 under pressure from Brackenfell to Kubo, Interchange. The N2 from the airport all the way through to Hospital Bend. M5 this morning, Ottery through to Maitland's, Barclay Road. Everything around Cape Town on somewhat of a go slow because of those conditions. Make sure you got extra time to get through.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
8 after 7, good morning. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Glad to have you along this morning. We'll talk about the big sort of cadre deployment story that coming up in the next little while. Lawson Naidoo from KSAC, he'll be on your radio. We'll find out more from the SIU as well. I want to know from the SIU, and we'll ask them, they've got to go through 45,000 visa applications. So these are applications for people to come and live here. And I don't know, this is a manual process. There wasn't a computer process then. I don't know if there is now. You've got to go through each one of those and work out if it was legit or not. Sure, that's a big thing to do. And then you probably haven't heard me use this phrase often enough. But on the radio this morning, we're going to talk about, are you ready? Fast fashion, okay? Yes, really, I'm an expert. I'm not, but I will be by 9 o'clock. We're going to talk about fast fashion and the way that clothes are made now and what that means for our industry. Fast fashion is basically you buy clothes, usually very cheap price, you wear them a few times, and then you sort of discard them. Not great for the environment, that sort of thing, but that's what fast fashion sort of is. We'll find out more about it. Keeping up with the times here on SAFM.
At SAFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Well, confirmation from the DA last night. It's now received records from the ANC's Cadre Deployment Committee. It's now studying them to see exactly which documents it has. The ANC handed over the documents following a ruling by the Constitutional Court that upheld an earlier Supreme Court of Appeal ruling that the ANC must hand over the documents under the Promotion of Access to Information Act. In the past, the ANC has said it's handed over the records of its Deployment Committee from, as I understand it, 2018 to 2021 to the Zondo Commission. It also seems to have said it did not have records of meetings before that. Now, under the ANC's sort of convention, the deputy leader of the ANC chairs the Deployment Committee. In other words, it would have been before 2018 that now President Cyril Ramaphosa was chair of that committee. The DA had asked for records of all of its of the ANC's Deployment Committee meetings from 2013 to 2023. Lawson Naidoo is the Executive Secretary at the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. Lawson, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you very much.
There's a lot of information for people to go through here, but I just want to step back from that for a moment. With what we know, could this turn out to be a victory for transparency? In other words, we finally get to kind of know what was happening, or do you think it's too early to even go that far?
Good morning, Stephen. That's an important point to start because we do need to go back to the basis of the application which the Democratic Alliance made, and the ANC as a private body was obliged to reveal these documents because the Democratic Alliance had to demonstrate that they had a right to this information in terms of the Promotion of Access to Information Act in order to assert a right, and that's sometimes quite difficult. But the arguments that were used by the Democratic Alliance were related to their oversight responsibilities in Parliament as the official opposition party. They argued that in order to have proper oversight over organs of state, they needed access to these records of the ANC's Deployment Committee so that they could properly exercise that oversight. And they also argued that they were preparing draft legislation on cadre deployment and again needed access to these records in order to inform the development of that legislation. So this is a far-sighted application of the Promotion of Access to Information Act, which has almost been forgotten because of the time this has been taken. But those were the reasons given by the High Court when it initially made its order. As we know, both the Supreme Court of Appeal and now the Constitutional Court have dismissed the ANC's applications for leave to appeal, which has left the ANC in the position where they were bound to disclose these records by yesterday.
I realise the issue of cadre deployment is hugely controversial. It's been a big issue for a very long time. The ANC has defended it strongly. I remember, of course, that a former public enterprises, Mr. Barbara Hogan, appeared to criticise it at the Zondo Commission. Could it be that cadre deployment is good or bad, but is better if there's transparency? In other words, it may not be a terrible thing if the ANC tells us how it's made certain decisions. Of course, there must be limits to that. I mean, politicians in a political meeting at a party political headquarters shouldn't really be making decisions about which judges get deployed.
Indeed, I mean, I think transparency is important in sustaining democracy broadly, Stephen, and particularly in this context is the knowledge of the role played by different stakeholders in determining key appointments in the public sector and organs of state is critically important to know whether there's been undue influence in that process, where the constitutional and legislative processes that are set out for the appointment of certain personnel in certain sectors have been adhered to or flouted, and in order to ensure that there is accountability for those decisions. So transparency is critically important. And I think this is, the victory or one of the victories that is being brought about by this piece of legislation. But we also have to accept that because it's a highly contested political terrain, there are huge political implications of the handover of these records.
If I remember correctly, the Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo, at the end of the Zondo Commission, he wasn't Chief Justice then, but he made a finding that cadre deployment is illegal. Do you think that finding would stand up in the Constitutional Court? I mean, this issue, it is political terrain, absolutely. It's legal terrain too.
Yeah. Well, we must also remember that there is a parallel case that the Democratic Alliance have brought to declare that the practice of cadre deployment is unconstitutional and illegal. That matter is still before the court, so there is no finding on that as yet. And I think that would certainly be an interesting legal and political case. But, in terms of the Constitution itself, the Constitution clearly says that nobody may be prejudiced or favored for a position in the public service simply because they support a particular political party. But that's, that's the only clear provision. There are other provisions about, people being appointed on the basis of skills and merit and so on. And the real challenge is to navigate that and to say whether a particular appointment was in pursuit of a policy of cadre deployment disregarding all of the other factors. And if we think, Stephen, to the state capture issue, and without mentioning names, there are a number of people who are heavily implicated in state capture, particularly in organs of state such as Eskom and Transnet. But if you look at their CVs, they would seem to be eminently qualified for those positions, yet they seem to have demonstrated severe ethical deficiencies when they got into those positions and enabled state capture to take place.
Lawson Naidu, thank you, Executive Secretary at CASAC. Really appreciate the insight. 7:15.
SAFM. Prime time all day long.
The Special Investigating Unit's now received two proclamations from President Cyril Ramaphosa, one to investigate corruption at Home Affairs in the issuing of visas, the other to investigate corruption at the Passenger Rail Agency going back to 2013. The Home Affairs investigation relates to, as I understand it, 45,000 visas given to people to live here. There was a huge spike in visa applications and visas that were granted just in the year 2018. The spokesperson at the Special Investigating Unit is Kaiser Khanyako. Kaiser, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and good morning to your listeners.
So if I can start with the Home Affairs investigation first, and I just want to make sure I've understood this correctly. It was 45,000 applications that your investigators have to go through. I think Home Affairs used a manual system at the time. I think it might still do that. So do your investigators have to go through each one and determine whether the right decision was made?
Definitely, that is what is expected of us. We have got to go through each one of them, and we are looking at all visas, all types of visas, whether it was a retirement person's visas or a study visa or any other visa that was done. Therefore, it's going to be a mammoth of a task, starting from 2004 to now, which is about 20 years of work. And the fact that you've just mentioned around the issue of manual visa applications being dealt with will just be pose one other problem, because if it was electronic, it would have been easier, but we have to do what we have to do.
Do these records even still exist? I mean, is the paper still, can you still read it? 2004, 20 years ago.
We hope so, because we, from the information that we got when we prepared the proclamation, some of that information is there. You'll remember there was also an investigation that was done privately by the Home Affairs before. Therefore, we just hope all of that information is still available, but we'll only know that when we get into the department itself.
Okay. The investigation at PRASA doesn't go quite so far back, 2013, and I remember Lucky Montana was the CEO. He was very involved in those trains that were too tall for our tracks. I remember actually talking to him on a train that he claimed worked in our system. It was going through a small section of track where they could work. What exactly are you investigating there? If I remember, this is the Swifambo contract.
Yeah, this one is very specific because you'll remember we are already investigating at PRASA on other matters. Therefore, when we were doing investigation, there was then this information coming forward, but it wasn't covered by the proclamation that we had. And therefore, we had to apply for this proclamation. One, we're looking at that Swifambo rail leasing contract. We're also looking at the Siangena technology contract on integrated security access management. And then we're also looking at Project Sive. So you remember there was the issue around ghost employees that was sort of uncovered. We were also given an opportunity to look at that, and then we hope we will finish that quickly, because already we are there. We have seen some of that information.
Okay, a lot of this information, specifically around Swifambo, came out during the Zondo Commission. So I presume that helps you. I realize that can't be used as evidence by you. But you want to bring criminal prosecutions against people? I mean, this has taken, 2013 is 13 years ago.
Yeah, no, the unfortunate part is, yes, we can't use the information for whatever court processes that is coming from the Zondo, but we are unable to then use that as a base of what we are trying to do. And once we get that, we'll have to do what needs to be done, because at the end of it all, if people have used the money, that is the state money, and that needs to be recovered. It has to be recovered regardless of when it was done. Therefore, it is important that this process be done so that that money can be recovered if they are found to have gotten the money illegally.
Kaiser Khanyako, thank you. Spokesperson of the Special Investigating Unit, you with SAFM, 20 minutes after 7 now the time. Joseph Mason is the legal officer of Unite Behind. It's an activist group representing commuters based primarily in the Western Cape. It's been looking at the issue around PRASA for many years. Joseph, good morning to you. Do you believe these investigations at PRASA will uncover any more information that maybe we haven't heard at Zondo and other cases?
Good morning. Good morning. Thanks very much. Yes, I do believe so. I think, there have been extensive investigations already done by the Hawks, that were supposedly and reportedly 90% and 75% completed, respectively, regarding Swifambo and Siangena corrupt contracts. That was reported by Lieutenant General Lebeya when testifying at the State Capture Commission. And they've done, they've gotten hundreds and hundreds of statements, and hopefully, those investigations will be handed over to the SIU to complete the investigations, because it seems that the Hawks cannot be trusted or could not be trusted with concluding their investigations.
It's a weird thing. Why would the Hawks not be trusted? They seem to have quite credible leadership. I know they have capacity problems. Is there any reason that we know as to why the SIU has to take this over? Well, from not quite, but sort of, from the Hawks?
Well, Chief Justice Zondo in his report stated that there's an inescapable he sort of pointed to the fact that there may be a reluctance to complete the investigations because it could implicate people very high up in the ANC, particularly for instance regarding the Swifambo corrupt contracts. that implicates Sifiso Buthelezi quite squarely, and he is currently the chair of the Standing Committee on Appropriations. And yeah, so obviously we don't know. That it's all been kept very much behind closed doors. But it's difficult to escape such conclusions. Yeah.
The other person involved in all of this was Paul Peters. She was the Transport Minister for some of the period in which this happened. Parliament's Committee on Interests and Ethics, Members' Interests and Ethics, made a finding against her in which they actually suspended her from Parliament. I think for the month of February, might be a bit longer than that. And yet she is still now the Deputy Minister of Small Business Development. As far as I know, the President's taken no action against her.
Correct, yeah, and this all flowed from a complaint that we submitted to the Ethics Committee at Parliament in 2020. Sorry, in 2022, and we have written to the President and to the ANC's Ethics Committee demanding that she be fired for her role. And that they look into the various other MPs who were involved with maladministration, state capture at PRASA during those dark times.
I mean, what we really need as well as prosecutions. Lucky Montana and other people surely should go to court. The case must be put to them. They must answer under oath for what happened. Are those prosecutions, is there any movement on those?
The only prosecution that we know of for any of these ranklings at PRASA was the chief engineer Daniel Mtimkulu, who I think we can no longer call him Dr. Daniel Mtimkulu because he was prosecuted for fraudulently making up basically his qualifications. And he was involved with the Swifambo and Siangena contracts, ensuring that those tenders were suited directly for the companies, and ensuring that they went ahead.
So Sifiso Buthelezi is still in his position. Paul Peters is still in her position. There have been, from what you say, very few prosecutions. The SIU is now investigating, and there seems to be some concern that the Hawks might not want to finish their investigations. Do you believe the government is committed to actual accountability for what happened here?
We don't, and we have had to try to ensure that some accountability takes place. And Sifiso Buthelezi in particular has, is trying his utmost to stop any transparency and accountability from taking place. He and Lucky Montana and 3 others have taken findings against them in the State Capture Commission report on review, and we have intervened in that case to assist the Commission. And Sifiso Buthelezi has also sued us for defamation for 5 million rand, stating that he and his brother's companies benefited to the tune of around about 120 million rand. From the Swifambo and other corrupt contracts at PRASA, and so we're fighting that as well, and that's coming to a head very soon. It's going into the discovery stage very soon, and then we obviously have a lot of political actions around this. Last year we had a 3-day fast outside Parliament, processing the lack of accountability by government to take these MPs to task. But yeah, so we definitely do not see the requisite accountability taking place at all regarding PRASA, and it's a tragedy because PRASA, it seems, is a forgotten SOE that affects the poorest of the poor. And we hope that the SIU investigations are finalized quickly, and that a message is sent that PRASA can no longer be used as an ATM for state capture.
Joseph Mason, thank you, legal officer at Unite Behind.
Makoti Down Products is a proudly South African family business, started more than 30 years ago with 12 geese and a piece of material. Makoti manufactures duvets, pillows, sleeping bags, and high-quality Egyptian cotton linen. Our down products are suitable for people with dust mite allergies and come with a lifelong guarantee. And we offer a nationwide cleaning service for all your feather and down products. Visit us at makoti.co.za or call us on 041 992 395. For quality down, Makoti Down.
The Free State Provincial Government, under the leadership of Premier Mxolisi Dukwana, will host the much-anticipated Free State Investment Conference. The conference seeks to promote the province as an investment destination through showcasing strategic investment projects. Do join us on the 27th of February 2024 at the University of the Free State's main campus in Bloemfontein. The Free State Provincial Government, harnessing partnerships, stimulating growth and development through investment.
Mzansi Africa.
Siyaloboga.
Siyabulela nangomso.
Thank you for witnessing the Africa Cup of Nations Côte d'Ivoire 2023 in your language of choice on SABC radio stations, digital platforms, and SABC TV channels.
Big ups to McDonald's for being on board.
Your magnificent and heartwarming support gave millions of South Africans a spectacular and exhilarating experience during AFCON.
Asonye. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. Desiree Ellis, she says they need to make up for lost time.
That's right. Qualifying for Paris 2024 is the one piece that's missing for the team, and they missed out the last edition in Tokyo. Now, Ellis has named her final 23 women Banyana squad dominated by players from Mamelodi Sundowns for their upcoming qualifier against Tanzania.
We know of the opponents. We have footage. We've already analysed them, but the same as they have analysed us, we have analysed them. They beat Togo, was at the last WAFCON, and that's no mean feat. They also beat Botswana recently to qualify for this stage, and we all know how good Botswana is and what happened back then. So we're not taking anything for granted. We've worked a lot on some of the things this week, obviously waiting for the international-based players to meet us on the other side and then continue with our preparations. But the analyst has done really well in getting as much information as they can and setting up an analysis on the opponent. And as the technical team, we've all studied that and we know what to expect. We have to be at the absolute best, of course, because that's the only way you get a result.
Action tonight will see the Nedbank Cup last 32 commence when Mamelodi Sundowns travel to La Masia at Dobsonville Stadium. 7 p.m. the kickoff, and at the same time, SuperSport United will take on Cape Town City at Lucas Moripa Stadium. While Crystal Lake FC chairman Magic Inyalungu has promised to knock Soweto Giants Orlando Pirates out of the Nedbank Cup. As reported, the less than a year-old amateur club from Mpumalanga has a dream date with the Nedbank Cup defending champions at Mbombela Stadium at 3 p.m. That's Saturday, the 24th of February. Elsewhere, Wales coach Warren Gatland has added uncapped prop Harry O'Connor to his Six Nations rugby squad ahead of Saturday's clash against title favourites Ireland in Dublin. The 23-year-old Scarlets forward went on as a replacement during a non-cap game between Wales and the Barbarians in November. And finally, swimming. Load shedding is the biggest danger to the medal aspirations of South Africa swimmers. As they build up to the Paris Olympics, coach Rocco Mering sounded the warning on the national team's return from the World Championships in Doha. Mering saying last year a generator had to be rented for over 200,000 rand a month, excluding fuel costs. Without a generator, while preparing for the Commonwealth Games, the squad had to be sent and looking for a warm pool to train. Now, in 2021, 3 weeks before the Tokyo Games, it was only then that a generator was hired. More sport headlines, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Well, we'll look at the situation. We'll look at the situation regarding tyres in the next little while. You with SFM leading the conversation. No load shedding for now. Stage 2 later, 7:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, e-tolls will officially be switched off from the 31st of March. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi made the announcement at the State of the Province address in Johannesburg last night. The DA has described the ANC's handing over its cadre deployment records to the party as a victory for transparency. A constitutional court order denied the ANC's application for an appeal and confirmed the High Court order in Johannesburg, ruling that the ANC's withholding of the records was unlawful. And some easing in the rate of unemployment is expected when Statistics South Africa releases the fourth quarter job numbers this morning. The quarterly labor force survey shows that the official unemployment rate dropped by 0.7% to reach 31.9% in the third quarter of 2023. I'll have details on these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. Pretoria's N1 stays heavy on the run to Rigel. We did give you all clear before. That's because an earlier crash between Rigel and the R21 had been cleared, and that was cleared, and everything started to move. But then shortly thereafter, the second crash this morning, this one closer to Rigel Avenue. So the N1 coming from Storumful down towards that scene remains heavily backed up. Big traffic on Joburg's N3 coming around from Germiston or out of Alberton off the N12. The problem is a side tipper truck broken down inside Galuli's interchange, N3 north to the N12. So again, if you've got flight connections to catch at OR Tambo and you're coming from the south, you might want to get to sort of Elan State, the N17, and then do the Rondebolt Road R21 up through Boxburg. That's a clear option. You'll just bypass big queues up into Galuli's today. Durban, the N2, into the roadworks north of Spaghetti Junction. Reasonably heavy queues coming through from the M7. Bottom end of the Phoenix Highway out towards the R102. That's looking very slow. That's an unusual backlog leaving Phoenix. And Cape Town with a bit of rain, a light drizzle, and some mist this morning. Driving conditions not great. What it's doing is keeping traffic levels on the high side and the speeds on the low side. Everything slow. M5, Ottery through to Maitland. N2 from the airport to Hospital Bend. N1 from Brackenfell through to Kuiper. Get a change behind that. R300's under pressure from Kales River all the way to connections into that busy N1 inbound.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray McClark, good morning. Asian markets, US markets, how's it looking?
Well, it is only China's market that is up. Investors are optimistic about a recovery in China's economy boosted by consumer spending in the tourism industry. China's stock market was closed last week for the Lunar New Year celebration. This holiday celebration period has boosted tourism revenues in China by 47% compared with last year. So in Asian markets, China's Shanghai Composite is up 0.2%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down 0.4%. And Japan's Nikkei is also down 0.3%. Before the US market opens later today, the US futures market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones, and S&P futures are each down 0.3%, and the local market, the JSE, was down 0.1% yesterday. The shares of mining companies were mostly down.
And DSTV is pushing up its subscription prices. Their costs are going up. The rand has weakened.
Yeah, from the 1st of April, DSTV plans to increase prices across its range of subscription packages. DSTV subscription prices are set to increase by between 3.1% rather, and 7.8%. DSTV told Tech Central about the upcoming price increases. The price of cheaper packages are set to be adjusted by a lower percentage increase. Meanwhile, pricier or premium packages will be adjusted by a higher percentage increase. MultiChoice, which owns DSTV, says it has to increase subscription prices because the cost of producing television content is becoming more expensive. MultiChoice is also grappling with a weaker domestic currency, which makes buying international television content more expensive. So MultiChoice is passing on these costs to consumers.
And then Itatowel, the biggest bathroom tile retailer, falling by 17% their profits in December.
Yeah, Ital is a bathroom towel retailer that owns brands such as Top T and CTM. Ital was profitable and benefited from COVID lockdowns because a lot of people were housebound and embarked on home improvement projects. Now that lockdowns have ended and public life has returned, people are not improving their homes, and consumers do not have the financial means to do so because of a tough economy. And because of this, Ital's profits came in 17% lower at 1.1 billion rand for the 6 months ending December last year.
Ray Machlaka, thank you, Ray. Of course, back tomorrow. More business news through the day here on SAFM.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
All right, William on the line from Cape Town. Hi, the passenger rail agency. William, well, I think you might have me switched on in the background. Anyway, go for it.
Hello, Stephen. Good morning. Stephen, I don't understand why it takes so long for these people to let the trains go, especially here in Cape Town on the Kailicha and the Mitchell's train lane. Because the thing is this, last week, the new trains, there were people that were actually, they actually caused destruction on that lines there. And I just say on the correction, but it seems like it's these taxi associations that are doing this. Because it's so cheap to travel train. Now, 3 weeks ago, I put a chain on my car and I used the train from Cape Town to Century City. And it cost me 750 cents.
Yeah, it's very cheap.
And I mean, you will never ever pay that in a taxi.
Yeah.
Any country that does not have a rail system, it affects the economy and it cannot operate. The taxis is just not sufficient to do that. And it just causes congestion on the road. And it's so easy. You know, I was working for the post office. And every morning, 5:05, I got my train. And in the afternoons, 2 o'clock, I got my train. It was on time. There was about every 5 or 10 minutes, there was a train.
Sure.
Okay, I'm on the road now and there's traffic up.
No, sure.
Okay.
Jeez, William, all right. You mustn't phone while you're driving. Thank you. That's funny, but I hear you. It's interesting, though. I mean, I think you're right. And I've got to ask, to what extent the sort of corruption that we've seen is responsible for what we're seeing on the railway. I mean, the impact it has, and I mean, maybe the sort of Prasa story is perhaps one of the best examples of how corruption has an impact on your daily life. And I mean, just the fact that so many people used to travel by train and don't anymore. And of course, yes, other people have benefited from that, and that I understand. You know, that's the way of things. But it just shows you how bad it really has been. Percy and Matlasana, the Special Investigating Unit. Hi, Percy.
Hey, good morning, Steve. How are you, my brother?
Yeah, I'm well. Go for it.
Steve, I'm very, very worried about SIU. SIU and the Hawks are the useless entity that we have in South Africa. You know why I'm saying so? I think we have more than 10 cases to 15 cases that we open in SIU. And the SIU, before they investigating you, they are getting go-ahead from the president. So it is a useless entity because of, if you complain about those who President Ramaphosa support them, they are not even bothered to investigate. So I don't understand what criteria they use to investigate, because they have more than 50,000 cases in president office, but they never go ahead so that they must investigate.
I mean, the thing that we don't see is people going to court, isn't it? I mean, I want to see someone in the dock. I want to see the questions put to them. And I want to see them answer them.
No one, even since SIU was established, who did SIU arrested? Which did nothing, no one. So SIU is the useless entity that we have because of, we don't know what's going on. Even the case of Strapa, since they've been investigating, did they release it? What did they say? Nothing. So SIU is the useless entity that we have in this country, and we are not going to get nothing from SIU.
All right. Percy, thank you. I mean, I don't know if the SIU is going to agree with that, but I hear you. Percy and Matlasana, 086 000 2032. Also, what are you expecting from the cadre deployment records? And now that the DA has them, I don't know how that's going to play out. And the president yesterday talking about water in Inanda in KwaZulu-Natal. I'm reminded of what Lindo said about how some communities have a louder voice in our media. I mean, it's very true. The reasons why that is, that the president saying the situation with water in Inanda will get sorted out. Voice notes coming through on 0614-104-107. You'd think I'd know it by now.
Good morning, SG. SG, I just hope that the SIU will also investigate the gentleman who came to buy the buffalo. They also investigate who gave him the visa, what was the visa for, and what was in his bags. They must find out as well.
Yeah, no, interesting. I don't think the SIU is going to necessarily do that at this stage. I don't know if there's been a request for them to do that, I must just say. So, it may well depend on that as well. Temba, you're in the Eastern Cape this morning on the SIU. Hi.
Look, Steve, the problem with SIU, it waits for 3 years to 4 years when the matter is reported. In that time, it's being corrupt people to clean the records. They're giving them to clean the chance to clean the records. They're giving them the chance to change the computer system, anything that is computer-based, the records. They change, the institutions are changing the mainframe of the IT system. So after 3 years, you're not going to get anything from that institution, anything. And the problem is, this thing of getting a go-ahead from a politician, that's where the problem is. But they are really a problem. Okay, let me not go into specifics. But that's what they do. That's what they do. They allow institutions to change computer systems. They allow the institution to clean everything, so that when they come back after 3 years, there is nothing for everybody that they have an interest into. There's nothing. They will only touch, the territory people and make example of them.
All right, Temba on the line from the Eastern Cape. I can hear your cynicism, and I know where it comes from as well. You're with SFM at 17 minutes now to 8.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Well, you would have seen the numbers that came out on Friday around crime, showing a slight increase in the murder rate, a slight decrease in the percentage in the rate of sexual offences in terms of the numbers, but also 22 police officers killed between October and December. This is the last quarter of last year. 10 of them were actually working as police officers, 12 off-duty. Often police officers, are killed for their firearm. Now, the South African Police Union is suggesting that one of the ways to deal with this is to increase the budget for community policing forums. Lesiba Tobachale is the spokesperson for the SA Police Union. Lesiba, good morning.
Morning, Stephen, and also to your listeners.
Why do you believe the community policing forums need more support? What would they do in the fight against violent crime?
When we look at the type of crimes that occur within our communities, it means that the members of the communities, most of these crimes, they happen in their midst, they happen around their communities. So if we really happen to strengthen community policing forum, it will clearly strengthen that relationship between themselves and the police. And in essence, by doing that, then the police will have the ears and eyes within our communities. And then that on its own, it will assist, will be able to hold hands together in fighting crime. But if the police, they are just left on their own to be the ones who are dealing with crime alone without any involvement or without any collaboration with community policing forum, we will continue to see this violent crime increasing, because believe you me, we know that the members of the community, they know what is happening within their communities, and even they themselves, they are tired of high levels of crime. So we are just calling for that collaboration to say that when the minister said that they had allocated 70 million within the financial year to community policing forum, that's why we are saying that it is not enough. They should do more so that each and every community would have an established community policing forum that will clearly have resources for them to collaborate very well with the police.
Do you think that the community policing forums always actually represent the community? I can imagine sort of, different views and different groups sometimes appearing. But do you think the ones that we have are actually working? Are they actually effective?
There are some that really do succeed. We see the collaboration doing well, except where others are just pushing their own agendas. Those who capture community policing forum, we are saying to them they should stop doing that, because the role of community policing forum is clearly to strengthen the collaboration between the community and also the police, which is what we need in fighting crime. But where there's others who are just coming to push their own agendas through community policing forum, that is really tainting what community Policing Forum is about, because it is established in terms of the Police Act. And indeed, if it is strengthened within all our communities, being in urban areas, being in rural areas, then we will see this great collaboration, and together jointly, the police and the community would be able to hold hands in fighting crime.
Lesiba, I mean, the example of Diepsloot is such a powerful example of what happens when a relationship between the community and the police break down. You've had community members there having protests against crime in the area. They get arrested by the police, and the relationship really between them is very, very bad. I mean, what kind of work does it take? And this will affect your members. You know, you're on the ground in Diepsloot. I mean, what does it take to try and restore community relations in a situation like that? And obviously what people in Diepsloot, what everyone wants, is reduce crime. If the police are effective, that's a very good place to start.
You know, the scenario in Diepsloot is unfortunate, Stephen, because it really means that social dialogue and the relationship broke down between the police and the community. And if there were issues indeed that the community had of concerns, we believe that social dialogue would have assisted, where the police and also the members of the community, through their leadership structure, to sit down and have a dialogue on those issues where they need intervention from the province. In terms from the provincial police or the provincial bosses within Gauteng to do so. If it needs national intervention, for them to do so, to say these are the issues that we are unable to really resolve amongst ourselves. So we don't want anything to go out of proportion. Unfortunately, it was not whatsoever that has happened there. The outcomes really suggest to us that social dialogue was not there amongst themselves, and there was no necessary intervention that was made at that time in order to remedy the situation. But there is indeed a need to really restore the relationship between the community and also the police in places like Diepsloot, so that we don't see the very same thing happening again, because the community and the police, they need one another. And if we really collaborate, we believe in collaboration as SAP, and we believe that if the police and the community, we collaborate, we will jointly be able to fight against high levels of crime.
I suppose the other question is, do you think that government and the police see in investing in community policing forums as the right approach? I mean, for them, the community policing forums might help, but sometimes they can just cause more problems for the police, and that they end up not having a great relationship.
That is why we are saying that the issue of not having anyone capturing community policing forum. If everyone who is in the structure of the community policing forum, they are there for the good intentions, and then they are there to say, let us collaborate with the police. I think everything, it goes with the intent to say, what is the intention of whoever it comes within the structures of community policing forum. We've seen a whole lot of success stories where, the members of the community, through their structure, they are able to really make successes to really assist the police in fight against crime. So we strongly believe as SAPU that everyone, when they join those structures, they must make sure that their intentions are correct. They are there to collaborate with us so that at the end of the day, we can be able to fight against crime, not for any other reason, because if anyone comes into those structures for any other reason, then it really defeats the purpose. So we believe as well with what you just asked, that funding community policing forum, it is the right approach, because indeed the police cannot do their work alone without having the involvement of the communities. And if you involve the members of the community, even they themselves, they take ownership of their own communities. They take ownership of the safety and security within their own communities. And the 23 police officers who were murdered, some the 10 who were on duty, some who were off duty, they were murdered within our communities. So if we have structures clearly that are really taking ownership of safety and security within their own communities, we will then start to see a change, because even the high level of murder that we have seen that is affecting the members of our communities happening in our own communities, then we would be able to take a strong stand against that and collaborate and ensure that we are fighting against all levels of criminality.
Lesiba Tobakhalep, thank you. Spokesperson for the SA Police Union, 9 minutes to 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Traffic out of Pretoria heading south to Joburg starting to move again towards Rigel Avenue. Crash on the side of the road, so all lanes have been reopened, but it's not yet a cleared scene. There is a stationary truck in the mix as well around Linwood Road, so coming through from Storenville Road through the N4 to Linwood it's slow, and then another sort of slowdown as you approach Rigel Avenue. The N4 coming from Rousseau Street through the N1 and in towards the Hatfield area. That's quite heavy this morning. Joburg's N3 remains heavily backed up out of Alberton and Germiston. A stationary side tipper truck inside Galilee's interchange is the problem there. So you're down a lane as you come off the N3 North onto the N12 East. The backlog is substantial. N12 from about Reading interchange, the N3 North from Rand Airport territory. Quite a big crash north of Durban this morning around the Mandini area on the N2. Just watch for some traffic control and possibly slow-moving traffic on that area. Durban's N2's heavy up through Spaghetti Junction, backlog from the M7, and the M7 Queensborough down to Bel Air and Wakesley very slow as well. Cape Town, the N2 busy enough through the sort of spits and spots of rain and some mist this morning, and a crash now near Bunga Avenue. So coming from the airport, the N2 towards town, very heavy. M5 Ottery through to Maitland is absolutely jam-packed. The R300 from Cales River moving up to the N1, very slow. Everything in Cape Town this morning a bit slow because of the weather conditions, noticeably slower. Traffic all over Marine Drive. There's queues at Sunset Beach, queues at Lagoon Beach, and queues through Pardon Island into that busy N1 highway. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Business owners, don't waste your time searching for an employee that has it all. They do not exist. But I will tell you what does exist. The Kia K2700 Workhorse. It's versatile, powerful, and reliable. It also arrives on time every day. Plus, you get 40,000 Rand cashback. It's the business partner you've been waiting for. Visit your nearest Kia dealership for a test drive. T's and C's apply.
Kia. Movement that inspires.
Mzansi Africa.
Yalabuga.
Siyabulela nangomso.
Thank you for witnessing the Africa Cup of Nations Côte d'Ivoire 2023 in your language of choice on SABC radio stations, digital platforms, and SABC TV channels.
Big ups to Unilever for being on board.
Your magnificent and heartwarming support gave millions of South Africans a spectacular and exhilarating experience during AFCON.
Asibonge. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
7 minutes now to 8 the time. Good to hear from you this morning. You know the number, of course, 086 000 2032. There's been quite a few sort of conversations around tyres recently, and the issue around tyres that don't actually meet the correct standards. I think part of this is because we're all trying to save a bit of money, aren't we? And so to do that, you sort of run your tyres a little longer, you go for a cheaper manufacturer, you try basically and manage, the situation as much as you can. Themba Kula is the automotive inspection manager at the National Regulator for Compulsory Specifications. Themba, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Are you finding that there are now more tyres on the road that aren't living up to the specifications that you're supposed to enforce?
Correct. There has been a flood of tyres which are non-compliant or which have not gone through the correct process of approval by the NRCS.
Where are these tyres coming from?
It depends on the manufacturing country, really. It could be anywhere, because there is always a notion that if most of the stuff are coming from the East, yet really there are other countries who manufacture tyres, and those tyres can find themselves in South Africa.
Okay. Have you seen, you say there's been a big increase. Does anyone know why this has happened?
I think they are falling through the cracks. By falling through the cracks, I mean that they do not follow the correct process. And knowing very well that at customs, not all containers or not all shipments are checked. And that gap is where some of these tyres go through.
Okay. So, I mean, then I presume what's happening is they're coming on containers, and I know customs, no customs in the world really checks every single container,
Yes.
do they? So they're basically being smuggled in.
Yeah, correct. You can say that, so.
Okay. Is there any way to stop it then? It would seem quite difficult to do that.
I think it's more than anything, it's public awareness. Everyone should know that when you buy a tire one should be bought from reputable outlet who you are able to trace their compliance, because each and every retailer of a tire is supposed to be able to trace the compliance of the tire. Because if one brings in a tire into South Africa, or even one manufactures a tire in South Africa, it should be approved. There is supposed to be a letter of authority concerning its compliance. So if the retailer is not able to furnish you as end user with such, it becomes a problem because it could be non-compliant.
Is there any way to look at a tyre and know automatically there's a problem with this tyre? I mean, most of us just look at the tread.
It's a bit dicey because one could. It gets to be technical because most tires are e-marked, and that's your first port of call where you say this particular tire is e-marked. It means that it is approved. But over and above that, one will need to have paperwork. So as a requirement, the retailer will need to ensure that the tires that they are selling are compliant.
Okay, so the only way to check then is through the retailer. You need to basically go to, I mean, everyone will say a reputable retailer and go from there. That's the only way to do it.
That's the best way, really.
Temba, thank you very much indeed. Temba Kula is the Automotive Inspection Manager at the National Regulator for Compulsory Specifications. It's very interesting how tyre suddenly comes to the fore, but I think you underestimate how important a tyre can be. 3 minutes now to 8.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Magdalene on the line from Mangaung. Hi, you want to talk about the SIU and Panyaza Lesufi, the Gauteng Premier?
Yes, for sure. Morning, Stephen and the listeners. Stephen, point is, SIU will never work out to benefit the South Africans. Never. Because I experienced them during the year 2001 at Grootvlei Correctional Center, whereby they were investigating corruption and the intervention of Gaten Mackenzie and Ken Kunene with those things of the videos and the cameras within correctional service. I gave them my statement because I was the owner of the business plan. So they ignored it. They put it aside and they collaborated with Gaten Mackenzie and Ken Kunene. So they will never, ever help out to can benefit the South Africans. I'm saying it. Number two, Ndate Panyaza Lesufi, I'm going to say to him, if you say he's helping out the spaza shops, the people who are here in spaza shops within the city and within the townships are the foreign nationals, the Somalians and the whoever. So is he helping them? Which South Africans is he helping out so that they can revamp their own economy? Because those foreign nationals are taking the money to their countries, not in South Africa. The last thing about the Zamazamas, he will never come all right until he take out the foreign nationals from the South Africa. I'm saying it because the Zamazamas are the foreign nationals from Lesotho. Go and see Lesotho. Lesotho is revamped. Lesotho is beautiful than 5 years back because of the Zamazama. They are taking the economy of South Africa out of South Africa.
All right, Magdalene, thank you on the line from Mangaung. I understand why you say what you say. I don't know if it's entirely true. All right, lots to come in the next little while. We'll talk about coffee. Should you have coffee as soon as you wake up? The answer is obviously yes. The scientists say no. You're at SFM leading the conversation, 8 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, Gauteng Premier promises the date for final shutdown of e-tolls and Stats SA to publish fourth quarter job numbers. This is SAFM News. A very good morning. I am Luyanda Maume. E-tolls will officially be switched off from the 31st of March. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi made the announcement at the State of the Province address in Johannesburg last night. There has been a delay in decommissioning the controversial tolling system since the announcement to scrap the system was made in 2022. Lesufi says the provincial government has met with both finance and transport ministers over the issue.
All of us now have reached an agreement that by the 31st of March this year, the formal process to switch off and de-link e-tolls will begin, and e-tolls will be history in our province. The Minister of Finance will elaborate on this subject.
The DA has described the ANC's handing over its cadre deployment records to the party as a victory for transparency. A constitutional court order denied the ANC's application for an appeal and confirmed the High Court in Johannesburg's ruling that the ANC's withholding of the records was unlawful. The DA will ascertain whether the records date back to 2013 when the current ANC president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was the chairperson of the National Deployment Committee. The DA's Leon Schreiber.
After more than 3 years of determined lawfare activism by the DA, we have succeeded in our quest to force the ANC to hand over cadre deployment records dating back to the period when President Cyril Ramaphosa was chairman of the Deployment Committee. This victory for transparency and the rule of law comes after the ANC was forced to bend the knee before the DA in court, where we won 3 successive battles with cost orders extending all the way to the Constitutional Court. The DA will now study the records to ascertain whether the ANC has complied with the court order in full. As soon as we have processed the documentation, the DA will fulfill our long-standing undertaking to make public the ANC's dirty cadre secrets for every South African to see.
Gauteng Education MEC Matume Chilwane says the 13-year-old learner accused of shooting a principal at Primrose Primary School in Germiston in the east of Johannesburg had been a troubled child. Chilwane visited the school following the shooting incident that occurred last week. The boy allegedly shot the principal after he was instructed to take out his books to study. The learner is expected to appear in the Germiston Magistrates Court soon. The principal is recovering in hospital. Chilwane has assured learners, parents and teachers that the department will apply safety measures at the school.
We will support you. The teachers are here. The school governing body is here. I am here to make sure that you're all safe. The team is here. The psychosocial. I brought everything for you. Speak to them until you feel that you're ready. Then we can have a plan to make sure that if you miss out on maybe a few days, we'll make a plan for you to catch up in school.
The City of Cape Town's Health Department has expressed concern over the increase in the number of teenage girls seen for their first antenatal visit as teen pregnancy spikes. Authorities say the last year, the number of teenagers aged between 12 and 17 who visited the clinic for their first antenatal visit was 632 compared to the 355 the previous corresponding year. The increase was seen across all city health districts. Mayoral Committee member for Community Service and Health, Patricia van der Roos, says the number of clinic visits for contraceptive services decreased. Last week, a pregnancy awareness event was held at Wallacedene to observe Pregnancy Education Week and Condom and STI Awareness Week. Van der Roos says while the aim of the week is to reduce pregnancy-related complications and encourage women to visit a clinic, they cannot turn a blind eye to the fact that girls are sexually active and there's an increase in teen pregnancies. And some easing in the rate of unemployment is expected when Statistics South Africa releases the fourth quarter numbers this morning. The quarterly labor force survey shows that the official unemployment rate dropped by 0.7% to reach 31.9% in the third quarter of 2023. Both the formal and informal sectors recorded a rise in employment, with the finance, agriculture, community and social service industries showing the largest employment gains. Independent economist Ellis Kruger.
The labour force survey for quarter 4 will be released tomorrow, and I do believe that we will see more job creation during that quarter. On the one hand, the economy picked up in quarter 4, and it's also the quarter in which we normally see quite an increase in seasonal workers given the festive period. On top of that, I want to add that Banks of Africa's data already confirmed that more salaries were paid in quarter 4 compared to the previous quarter. So all in all, I do expect some positive news in the labour force survey, maybe a tweak down on our unemployment rate.
Recapping your top story, the e-tolls will officially be switched off from the 31st of March. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi made the announcement at the State of the Province address in Johannesburg last night. For SAFM News, I am Luyanda Maume. Headlines at 8:30.
A very good morning to you. In your SFM sports headlines, it's soccer action with the Orlando Pirates coach saying he wants a huge fight from his players to defend their Nedbank Cup title. And we have the SAFA president, Danny Jordan. He mentions that it'll be tough going for Banyana when they take on Tanzania. All these stories and more just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's a busy one on a couple of highway networks around Pretoria this morning. The N4 driving inbound from Rousseau Street down towards the N1 and across into Hatfield is a really busy one. Still with the breakdown on the M1 south at Linwood Road and the earlier crash down at Rigel. That's now being cleared. So the M1, once you sort of get past Linwood Road, stays busy, but it does tend to move on. Stationary trucks still with us inside Galuli's interchange. The N3 and N12 routes out of Germiston and Alberton, very heavy. N12 from Reading, the N3 from the Rand Airport interchange area. Those highways jam-packed into Galuli's. Make sure you've got plenty of time to get up and get through for flight connections or look at alternative routes. Durban's N2 this morning from the M7 through Spaghetti Junction is slow as you hit the roadworks. There's also been a crash scene near Sabaya, so if you're driving in from the airport to Durban, N2 South is under a bit of pressure. In Cape Town, there's traffic everywhere this morning. The highways are busy. Also, a lot of congestion around the Newlands, Claremont, Rondebosch and Rosebank areas. Routes like Campground Road, Belmont Road, Park Road, the main road, Lisbeck Parkway, all very, very slow. And lots of traffic on Marine Drive, still queuing Tableview, Sunset Beach, another queue from Milnerton into Pardon Island, and then from Pardon Island through towards the N1. That's your third queue that you'll pick up. N7 worth a mention as well, coming from Malabongwe down through Platycliffe, slow going towards the Bosmansdam Road exit.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7 minutes after 8. Good morning. You're with SFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. Nice to have you along with us this morning. We'll talk a little bit about what's happened with Steinhoff and how we still don't seem to have much accountability for that. Accountability, I think, being one of the sort of themes of the morning. We'll talk about coffee in a little while, and then fast fashion from 8:30. Really looking forward to it, actually, and how fast fashion is speeding up. It's changing very, very quickly. And what that means is that people are buying more clothes for less money, wearing them less often, wear them a couple of times, and sort of discard them. But that has huge impacts on our industry here. In fact, I don't know if our industry can really keep up. So I think that's going to be an important conversation. Looking forward to that from 8:30. You know the number, 086 000 2032. Conversations this morning about about PRASA, about the Special Investigating Unit. Also conversations this morning around cadre deployment, a big issue. 8 after 8. Good morning.
There's a song that goes, "Money can't buy me love." And that's true. But then they told us all you need is love, which anybody with a mortgage will tell you most certainly is not true. Love won't pay your parking tickets or your student loan. It's also needy. It requires effort, availability, constant care. But more importantly, love requires time. And while money can't buy you love, it can certainly free up some of your time. Time to spend on the things you love, with the people you love. And if you're looking, maybe even time to find the one you love. That's why, after 50 years of investing, we've learned that time is the greatest gift of all. And the good news is, if you invest early, time gives you money. And then money gives you more time to do the things you love. And don't you love that about investing? Ellen Gray, long-term investing. Ellen Gray is an authorized FSP.
Golden Arrows and TS Galaxy have a huge disagreement on who gets to play in the next round of the Cup of Dreams. Abafana Bestende clashes with the Rockets. This is the Nedbank Cup round of 32. Golden Arrows versus TS Galaxy on Friday, 23 February at 6:30 p.m. Live on SABC Plus and SABC radio stations. Also available on sabcsport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Well, 10 after 8. We took a call yesterday from Lindo in Durban, and he was talking about going to a sort of photographic shop to get something printed, and then found that when he was there, he said that the person behind the counter almost ignored him Lindo was sort of standing there. He said a customer was looked after. Then another person, a white person this time, walked in and was looked after immediately, and he was sort of ignored. And I think the way he put it was almost as if I didn't exist. And I remember it quite clearly. He made several points in his call. Crispin on the line from Durban. Crispin, hi. You heard that conversation yesterday.
Yeah, and it set off bells for me because I've experienced this. I mean, I don't experience it as a white person because I don't have this stuff thrown at me. But at times when I've gone into, say, a supermarket with sort of black friends, especially if they're a bit younger, is of me suddenly becoming aware of all of this tensions and these what they call microaggressions directed against them, sometimes more than micro. I mean, had somebody burst into tirades of swearing against a friend of mine for something which was so completely innocuous. And, you know, I'm very pleased that somebody actually says something about it and doesn't normalize it. It shouldn't be normalized at all, but it keeps happening. I had friends of mine who went on their first trip to Kruger National Park, and it was a hot day. They arrive at Skukuza, they go in the swimming pool, and everyone else gets out.
Aye,
and I'm thinking, what is happening? What is happening in the minds and the, well, it's the feelings of these people. Why do they feel so threatened? Why do they block out consciousness and not see people, but only or see them only as a threat and not as human beings? But I must say something else as well. I went to it was a Photoshop because it was at the next to the motor licensing bureau in Rossborough in Durban, and you have an eye test, then you get to have your photo taken. And I go with my friend. He needs some help. I go with him. He's black. There is a white woman, the only person there. So she tells my friend what to do. She then, his picture's taken, and she picks up the photo and says to him, "You look beautiful in this photo." So there's somebody with an Afrikaans accent, and I think for a kind of working class background, and she's talking like this. She turns to the other people there who are black and says, "You guys are all beautiful." And it was such a contrast. It was such a contrast. It was like so positive. And people were smiling and interacting with her and laughing. And I thought, things don't have to be as grim and miserable as we make them. And anyone can break through this stuff by taking on that attitude.
And it's not hard. I mean, it might feel hard, but it's not hard actually once you do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, I because I speak a bit in Zulu, I talk to cashiers. I get extra privilege now because people are so pleased to be treated like that they interact with me, and there's this kind of sense of Ubuntu, which is there. We need to cultivate that. I don't think many people experience that sense of Ubuntu very much in our society.
Yeah, no, Crispin, I'd agree with you. Thank you. On the line from Durban, I'm sort of struck by your example of a swimming pool on holiday, and and sort of reminded of what's happened over the holiday season in South Africa from time to time, and sort of wonder if there's something about sort of holidays and apartness. During much of the year when people are at work, you sort of work together, don't you? I mean, that's sort of what happens, is that you end up working with a diverse group of people. And I often think that really one of the few spaces in this country where people are brought together is actually the workplace. I'd say there are two, workplace and schools, are really the sort of only two you can kind of legislate. You can't legislate who people are friends with or have braais with or just nyama or whatever it is that you want to talk about. But you can for schools and for workplaces. And I wonder if when we're apart from that, and we sort of go away on holiday, we kind of forget that, and go back into our groups or someone will probably use the phrase lager, but I don't really mean it like that. And so I mean, I wonder if that's what sort of happens. I think that might be one of the things to it. Anyway, your view, your experience of it, 086 000 2032. It's just gone 8:15.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
Well, in Germany now, they've started what I understand is actually going to be the third trial looking at the Steinhoff corruption scandal. And there's been huge interest in all of this. You'll remember, of course, Marcus Jooste was the CEO at Steinhoff. He was accused basically of cooking the books. He has not faced charges here. He's faced, I think, one parliamentary hearing, but hasn't as yet, as far as I know, actually been criminally charged. But But now we see that in Germany there have been several cases around all of this. Matthew Parks is the spokesperson for the Congress of South African Trade Unions. Matthew, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you for having us.
It's been interesting to see how this has played out, because it would appear that actually in Germany, despite the fact there have been trials, there hasn't been proper punishment for what happened.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a depressing saga on both sides. So Germany, yes, 2 convictions secured, that's great. They're embarking on the 3rd trial this week. But if you look at the sanctions, one person got 3 years with a year suspended, other person got 2 years completely suspended. So you ask yourself, what kind of a sanction is that? That could perhaps be fitting for stealing, a carton of milk or something trivial, but not when you have been involved in the theft of billions of rands of workers' pension funds. It just makes no sense. But, at least the Germans have done something. It's good. It's interesting, Stephen, you mentioned just now that Marcus Jooste was called to Parliament. So he was called to Parliament 5 years ago in the run-up to the last elections.
Yes, long
5
time
years
ago.
later. Yeah, I remember sitting there, and the Standing Committee of Finance did a lot of work calling the Hawks, the police, etc., the NPA. Big promises were made. 5 years later, nothing. It's beyond depressing.
Yeah. I know that it's a complex trial, and I've been told that all the way along, that it'll be a complex trial and be a big defense and all the rest. But is that good enough? So many years later, nothing is done. And the signal this sends to other people who might indulge in corruption is just astonishing.
No, it can't be justifiable. One appreciates you're not going to do this thing in 5 minutes. It's fine. You can appreciate maybe it'll take 6 months, a year to build a solid case, and you don't want the NPA to go to court with the case and nothing happens or it gets dismissed. But half a decade, surely we can do better than that. Surely we can make an example, given that we've come from a decade of state capture, to make a few examples to society and to other people who want to steal, that there is consequences. But right now, the message is that if you steal workers' pension funds, you can do it in daylight, and no one will do anything about it. You can go and loot entire parastatals like Eskom and Transnet or the state, municipalities, and nothing will happen to it. It's not the only case. Former Mayor Vetequini was charged. He resigned from a post. I think it's about 5 years later. Doesn't see the day of light in court. And there's just countless examples. And really one has to ask, what is the leadership of the NPA doing? Are they interested in pursuing this thing? If they're not, can they make space for those are? But I think also, we have the budget speech tomorrow. It really will be opportune for the Minister of Finance to announce what additional resources are we giving the NPA to fill critical prosecuting vacancies, what support are we giving to the Hawks and the SIU to make sure they can also play their role in tackling crime and corruption.
From what I can see, there's the will and there's also the capacity. The Hawks many times have said that they don't have the capacity to do what they need to do, and I understand that. But I can't see any improvement in the capacity either, and surely that's a problem.
No, and it just defies logic. And again, one doesn't expect miracles overnight, but it's 5 years. President appointed these people, and they need to, either say they can do the job or they can't. But it can't be we're just doing nothing. And things can be fixed. If you look at, for example, the South African Revenue Service, it also went through a period of state capture. But, under this administration, a competent manager were put on board. They employed additional 500 staff. They invested in IT capacity and so forth. And you can see the results. Tax collection revenue has improved significantly. You can see we're turning the corner on that front. But one doesn't get the sense in the NPA. And again, if there's an issue of a shortage of prosecuting vacancies, they need to make a noise about it. They need to say publicly, we can't do this unless you give us X, Y, and Z. And then, we can hold Treasury accountable. But right now, we see literally nothing to be done at all.
Thanks very much indeed, Matthew Parks. Really appreciate the time. And he is the spokesperson for COSATU there, 19 minutes after 8.
TV licenses have developed a new GIS-linked national address database to ensure that we can communicate with all our valued license holders. We now have a visual of all licensed and unlicensed households nationwide in order to effectively communicate with you. We remind you to take note of our payment reminders and avoid paying penalties due to non-compliance or choosing to ignore your legal obligation to pay your license fees. We can communicate with all our license holders through cost-effective electronic methods, enabling us to collect license fees and continue to support the national broadcaster, the SABC, in accordance with Section 27 of the Broadcasting Act No. 4 of 1999 as amended. TV licenses. Pay yours. Make a difference.
Mzansi Africa.
Siyalobuka.
Siyabulela nangomso.
Thank you for witnessing the Africa Cup of Nations Cote d'Ivoire 2023 in your language of choice on SABC radio stations, digital platforms and SABC TV channels.
Big ups to Hollywood Bets for being on board.
Your magnificent and heartwarming support gave millions of South Africans a spectacular and exhilarating experience during AFCON.
Asonye. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Free State Provincial Government, under the leadership of Premier Mxolisi Dukwana, will host the much-anticipated Free State Investment Conference. The conference seeks to promote the province as an investment destination through showcasing strategic investment projects. Do join us on the 27th of February 2024 at the University of the Free State's main campus in Bloemfontein. The Free State Provincial Government, harnessing partnerships, stimulating growth and development through investment.
SAFM values your views. Be an active citizen.
21 minutes after 8 with a burning issue of our times. When in the morning should you drink your cup of coffee? I drink mine on the road in the mornings. I know lots of people who do that. So I've showered. I've probably been awake for about half an hour or so by the time I start. I know plenty of people on weekends, I must just say. I think literally the moment that I wake up, I start to drink coffee. So I don't know where you fit into that. Some people have managed to hold off their coffee until sort of the middle of the morning. Why would you wait that long? Could someone explain that to me, please? Rita Harmse is a dietitian and an intuitive eating specialist. Rita, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before I start, are you a tea drinker or a coffee drinker? Please don't tell me you drink rooibos in the morning. So boring. Does nothing for you.
No, when I read this article, I thought that I'll start the interview by saying that I have my cup of coffee in my hand, and I am a coffee fan. I really love coffee. I have nothing against tea, but it's not my drink of choice.
Yeah, I become a coffee snob as I get older. It's very sad. So when's the best time to drink coffee? I mean, on weekends, as I say, the moment I sort of wake up bleary-eyed, sort of, and go straight to the kitchen and put the kettle on. During the week, sort of while I'm in the car, I think a lot of people do that as well.
So I do think that the big thing to remember is that the article that you are referring to from the Sunday Times Live, they spoke to sleep experts. So I think the big thing to remember about this is that they talk about the effect that caffeine has on sleep and the cortisol levels and all of that. So I do think that this is not a one size fits all. That's the first thing that I want to mention. But the reason why reaching for your coffee first thing in the morning might not be the best is because your stress hormone cortisol is at its peak when you wake up. So that helps enhance alertness and focus, as well as regulating your metabolism and immune system. So this is interesting. This is also why sometimes people might be nauseous in the morning and struggle to eat a massive breakfast. So those people who skip breakfast because they just say it just feels too heavy, it might be because of this cortisol. So in terms of that, if your cortisol is already at its peak, if you drink coffee as soon as you wake up and open your eyes, it can do more harm than good. So and maybe affect your immune system over a long period of time if that's your regular go-to. So the short answer is not earlier than 45 minutes after waking. Ideally 2 or 3 hours after waking would be ideal for your first cup of coffee.
Okay, just to be clear, I'm never going to do that, all right? Just so that we understand each other. So you say that, there's sort of a lot of stress hormone around when you wake up. I mean, does that explain every teenager ever when you try and get them to school?
It definitely does, 100%. So same thing like, for example, as I said, not having an appetite at breakfast time. Oftentimes people would, another possible hypothesis for this that people said, like that your anxiety levels are the highest in the morning, is you think about everything that needs to happen for the day. I need to get at school. I have this test. I'm going to see my crush. I'm going to whatever, like the tasks of the days at hand. And the same for a working person, thinking, oh my goodness, I have this presentation for my boss and I'm going to get feedback on this project. But besides that, it is because your body literally tries to keep you more alert and focused. So now if you throw coffee in the mix, what sometimes then happens is it's this perfect storm that then leads to the crash. And that's when, unfortunately, we don't follow that up with a nice balanced meal. If you like the majority of the world, then that gets followed up by another cup of coffee. And the moment when the next crash hits, it's another cup of coffee, rather than looking at alongside my coffee. Because like I usually tell people, if it's something that you love, we don't just drink coffee for the caffeine effect. We also drink it for the taste, for the like having a social setting with your colleagues, etc., etc. So in terms of that, I do think that it is important to say, if you're going to have it in the best way possible, by combining it with a nice balanced breakfast, by having it with a nice balanced meal, etc., etc.
And I suppose, lots of people drink coffee in different ways. I sort of have one cup in the morning with a little bit of milk and the other cup black as I start the show. But there's also a routine to it, isn't there? I mean, it's sort of, I think a lot of people when they arrive at an office, it's the start of the day. And that means something. It sends all sorts of other signals. I'm now going to work.
Yes, and I do think that like having your rituals and things that you enjoy. So typically, I can tell you, like when I was pregnant, for example, and you are allowed for those pregnant women listening, you are allowed a certain level of caffeine. So I think it is about 2 cups a day. But you've mentioned accurately in the beginning that after COVID, I've also become somewhat of a coffee snob, having good and high quality coffee at home, and then not being able to go back to normal instant coffee after that. It was one of those things that I then switched over to decaf coffee during my pregnancy, and I realized it's not just for the caffeine. It was really for the taste. It was for, as you say, signaling the start of your day, the social setting with your colleagues, with your family. So I do think that if you have a ritual of having coffee, it might be good if you just like spread that a bit later in the day. Let's say you wake up at 6 and you shower and you do all your other, like getting ready for the ladies, blow drying your hair, putting on your makeup, and then when you have your breakfast at, let's say, 6:30, or if you're a bit longer, 6:45, that's the ideal space then to have your coffee with, because then it is 45 minutes, your cortisol levels have started to dip a little, and then it is where you don't necessarily feel that slump a bit later on.
Rita Harumsa, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate the time, the advice from her. She's a dietitian, an intuitive eating specialist. You want my advice? Drink it when you want it, 28 after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Just like Zai Khan. Zai, good morning. Orlando Pirates might need some caffeine tonight.
Yes, a good cup, in fact. Giving them the edge, hopefully, in this Nedbank Cup title defense. They have a team that's known as a minnow team. It's called Crystal Lake. The last 32 will happen at Mbombela Stadium. The Pirates coach saying it's vital for the Buccaneers to get back to playing continental football, and the Nedbank Cup gives them a chance to secure a spot in next season's CAF Confed Cup. In the meantime, the Banyana head coach Desiree Ellis has named her final 23-woman Banyana squad dominated by players from Mamelodi Sundowns, and this is for their upcoming Olympic qualifier against Tanzania, with SAFA President Danny Jordan admitting that the away tie in Dar es Salaam will be a tough encounter for Banyana.
Tanzania is one of those emerging teams on the continent, and we wish Banyana all the best. It's going to be a difficult game, and but we believe in this team. This team has shown over a period of time that they can produce when the pressure is on.
Now, Manchester City boss Pep Guardiola looks ahead to his side's Premier League clash against Brentford tonight. Last season's treble winners slipped to third. That's on the table following Saturday's 1-1 draw with Chelsea, but they could climb back to second with the win tonight.
The last 50 games, we won 13 and we draw 2. And the 2 we draw, we play to win the game. The pressure is the same, no difference. But I know the standards that we have, we create to be there for what we have done in the past. And I understand completely the doubts for the people, but what I'm seeing, I'm more than satisfied.
Now, Thomas Frank's Brentford, they lie in 14th place, and he says they still have the desire to beat their tough opponent.
It's odds against, of course, for us to go there and beat City, but we need to believe that we can do it, because if you don't believe you can do it, then there's no reason for us to turn up. We are playing against, many have said it, they are the best team in the world right now.
And that's a wrap off your sport here on Sunrise. More sport comes to you on SAFM around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. You're with SAFM leading the conversation in the world of fast fashion. That's next, just gone 8:30.
Thank you, Stephen. In your headlines, the High Court in Pretoria is expected to deliver judgment in the Democratic Alliance's constitutional challenge of the ANC's long-standing cadre deployment policy tomorrow. In January last year, a full bench had the DA's application to declare cadre deployment unconstitutional and unlawful. Gauteng's e-tolls will officially be switched off from the 31st of March. Premier Panyazali Sufi made the announcement at the State of the Province address in Johannesburg last night. And thousands of doctors in South Korea have resigned in protest at plans to boost the number of medical students. The government says it wants to solve the worsening shortage of healthcare staff, but those who've walked out fear the changes could lower their earnings. I'll have details on these and other stories at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
What's all happening around Galuli's interchange in Joburg today? We've still got the side tipper that's broken down on the N3 North linked to the N12 East. It's blocking lanes as you come off the N3 North and try to move to Boksburg or the airport. So the backlog of that is substantial. It's right down to 4 Trekker Road on the N12 in Alberton. So N3 North is heavy. Look for alternative routes out via Boksburg if you need those flight connections and you're running a bit late. You'll be very late if you take the N3. Also, vehicle fire incident just holding up traffic R24 onto the N12 coming in from Ekurhuleni to Galuli's as well. Crash on Grayston Drive before Linden Street. That's moving off the highway in towards Sandton. Behind that, the Mike 1 is quite heavy coming up from Melrose to off-ramp into that traffic on Grayston Drive. N1 south through Pretoria, all clear now. The breakdown at Linwood and the crash scenes at Rigel Avenue, all very much out of the way. Durban easing up nicely. Just a bit of a hold-up on the N3 if you're driving in from Pine Town. There's some traffic restrictions around Pavilion Mall to Spaghetti Junction because of roadworks, and we think that's what the traffic's being held in. Cape Town, N1, inbound, heavy this morning from Belleville right the way through to the city centre. Give yourself plenty of time to get through that. N2 inbound badly backed up from the airport. The M5 at Kenilworth. The M3 from Constantia up towards UCT. Everything's on a go slow. Traffic levels high, volumes high, and speeds are slow this morning, largely on account of a bit of rain and some misty conditions across Cape Town. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
27 minutes to 9 the time for your mediated conversation this Tuesday morning. About 18 months ago, you might have caught a conversation about fast fashion here on SAFM, the rise of a Chinese online retail group called Shein. Fast fashion works on a model in which companies will make a limited range of clothes that people will only wear a few times before you move on to a new set. In other words, it's fashion that moves very quickly. These clothes are very cheap and obviously, I suppose, very trendy. However, for South Africans, a company like Shein is able to undercut our companies. It means that no one here can compete. Now it seems another Chinese company called Temu could actually provide the same kind of clothes for cheaper prices than Shein. In other words, it would seem that the world of fast fashion is becoming cheaper and quicker. More of our companies, as a result, could find themselves unable to compete. So what's happening in the world of fast fashion and in online shopping, and what impact will this have on our textile industry? First, Nicola Cooper is a trend analyst and cultural expert, works with major retailers around the country. Then, the continued rise of online retail. Suphumelele Zondi is the expert, is an SABC TV presenter and expert on all things technical. He'll also explain what happens when Amazon comes and if they're going to compete in this market. Bronwyn Wilkinson is a trend translator at Flux Trends. She'll explain how all of this is changing and also the economics of it. And finally, the impact of all of this in our industry. Simon Eppel was the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union. We start then with Nicola Cooper, the trends analyst. Nicola, good morning and thank you for your time.
Good morning and thank you for having me.
How does fast fashion work?
So fast fashion, I'll try and get it in a nutshell, is really high turnaround, high trend. I think in some of these sites, they can replicate something on a red carpet or on a runway within 24 hours, if not less. And then really given at, I guess, affordable or even highly discounted prices. So it is something that's very, very fast moving. It does require really low costs, in terms of workforce and things like that. And that's really sort of the driver of fast fashion is what we refer to as imitation versus differentiation. So what you see on the runway will be imitated. Therefore, what you see on the runway again will be a shift from that. And that's really one of the key drivers of fast fashion.
Is it beginning to move more quickly than it did? I mean, I know it's been around for a few years, but is it moving faster now?
Yes, it is moving faster. I think, that's just with the rapidly changing landscape of technology, social media, e-commerce. So there is a lot going on those platforms that are really, really driving the fast fashion realm. It's also accessibility and choice, where South African consumers were really limited to our own retailers, from a geographical perspective. And what the internet and e-commerce has done is opened up all those geographical boundaries. With like 48.5% of South Africans making online purchases weekly, that's an astronomical amount.
Nearly half the population is buying online every week.
Yes.
That's half the population, not half the value.
Half the population.
Really?
Yes. In fact, we're actually leading global internet usage. We're spending about an average of like 9 hours and 24 minutes online. And most of that, because we are sort of a mobile-first landscape, 57.6% of that is via mobile.
Sure. I'm still amazed that it's nearly half are buying online. Okay. Could this speed up? In other words, you get to a point where people are wearing a set of clothes once, maybe twice.
I think it's just the longevity aspect is not really necessary when it comes to trends, because it really is about fulfilling that seasonal moment. It doesn't have to last more than 6 months. But I also think it really is in what I've referred to as a democratization of trends. Fashion has always been positioned as a little bit of an elite sort of space. And what that does is it allows accessibility to trends that are more affordable and more centered around price-sensitive consumers. And I think that's really around the fact that, those aspirations of feeling trendy or fashion-forward don't expire when you're looking at a price-sensitive consumer. And they also deserve to feel and look beautiful and on trend and fashion conscious. So I think a lot of that is also driving the adoption rates of these trends.
Does this affect one gender's clothes more than the other?
I think it's really across the board, but obviously females do sort of change and are almost demanded by society to be a little bit more fashion forward, a little bit more sort of it's really centered around visuals more so than sort of the male population. So, it's also female fashion is a lot more complex than menswear. So you're predominantly seeing it in female wear. But I think, in terms of aspects like sneaker trends and things that are really highly trend driven for men, we're starting to see an increase there as well.
Nicola Cooper, thank you. Trends analyst and cultural strategist. 20 minutes now to 9. Your mediated conversation around fast fashion continues. Siphumelele Zondi is the presenter of Network on the SABC News Channel and also a lecturer in the subject. Siphumelele, good morning. Thanks for your time once again.
Hello, how are you, Stephen? And thank you for inviting me.
So we've seen online shopping growing in South Africa. I didn't realize that nearly half the population are actually buying things online. It's growing very quickly.
Oh, that's where I disagree with Nicholas, because the business report has online shopping in South Africa at about 6% at the moment, and to grow to about, I believe, 9% in the year 2027. So it can't be half the population, also because of our connectivity issues and all those things. And remember that it's a wide spectrum of shoppers, so it definitely wouldn't be half the population. But that's where I disagree with Nicholas. The business report has us at about 6% to grow to about 9% in the year 2027.
You'd also need credit cards to do it, really.
You need credit cards. So there are other platforms, but a lot of them are not easy to use in South Africa. I think PayPal, for example, it is available rather, but it's more used in the United States than it is here. So with all the technologies that you need, and also when you then were to look at the number of South Africans, look at the unemployment rates, how many people would be approved of for credit cards rather, and all those things. So it is more complex. So maybe it is 50% of a certain demographic, but definitely not 50% of the entire population.
Okay. We've had Shein, we have Temu, we're expecting Amazon. Are they going to compete in the fashion space as well? Do we even know what they're actually going to do here yet?
Well, we're not sure what Amazon is going to be competing in yet, but they are to launch this year in South Africa. But it should be in just about every product as they are overseas. And Shein is purely fashion, and Temu, which is relatively new in the South African market, is selling just about every kind of product from fashion to technology and everything in between.
I would imagine the competition in the online space is going to get really, really intense. So that means that things get cheaper. People can sort of compare and contrast much more easily than they used to be able to by going to the store. Are consumers definitely benefiting from this? And I suppose if they didn't, they wouldn't spend so much time online.
I would say the benefit is on price, right? Because with the Chinese e-commerce platforms like Shein and Temu, prices tend to be lower than they are on other platforms. And I suppose in South Africa there's a problem that has also been raised abroad as well. I know it's a big talking point in the United States. It's become a talking point in South Africa as well. The fact that these Chinese e-commerce platforms are basically making use of a tax law that says if you shop below a certain amount of money, or if products cost below a certain amount of money, then they don't have to pay tax on those products. Whereas physical stores have to bring products in bulk. And as they bring them in bulk, then they would have to pay that tax, which then is why then their products would cost a lot more, because you're not buying one item, or they're not buying one item at a time. Whereas if you're importing, because that's basically what it is, you're importing through Shein or you're importing through Temu, you buying one item at a time, and therefore you're getting those tax cuts because it's below a certain amount of money.
It also makes it, I presume, difficult for the South African retailers, the online South African retailers, to compete as well. And there are some who are pretty strong in this space.
Oh, totally. You would think of Zendo, for example, which has been selling clothes for a very long time in South Africa. You think of Take-A-Lot, but they also, again, would have to import the products if they're bringing them in, or have to manufacture the products locally, which means they do have to pay that tax if the product is available in South Africa or kept in South Africa, because it should have been brought in bulk. So it's difficult for them to compete then with the ones that don't have have to do that. But then again, with Timo, it's also unclear on why they are as cheap as they are, because they pretty much have have managed to undercut Shein. But it could be on who's manufacturing the products back in China, how much the person who's manufacturing the products back in China charging for their services. And Shein has said that they don't make these products themselves. They say they get them from Timo rather. They say they get them from suppliers, and so it's not a conversation they can have. It's suppliers who can have that conversation on how they are able to make it available at such a low price.
Thanks very much indeed. Siphumelele Zondi is the presenter of Network on the SABC News Channel, as you can hear, an expert in the subject. At 8:45 the time, your mediated conversation around fast fashion continues. Bronwyn Williams is a futurist, economist and business trends analyst. I don't know where I got the Wilkinson from earlier. Not enough coffee this morning. Bronwyn, good morning and thank you for your time.
Morning.
When we look at how this is changing, one of the key things is that these clothes are really cheap. And this brings us to the question, how can they be so cheap?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, we're not very efficient here in South Africa. This is a reality that we have to work with. And that's fine when we are competing with trade moats, where our government has protected our local industry with things like taxes and tariffs. But at an international scale, we're just not as efficient and as competitive as other parts of the world that have lower or higher labor productivity rates, that have lower costs in the manufacturing process and more efficient supply chains. I was having a conversation this week that people originally thought the problem with distribution here in South Africa is the last mile delivery, but actually we've got problems from the first mile all the way through to the last. I mean, our ports don't work, our rails don't work. Everything is a little bit slower and a little bit more costly to get from point A to point B here. And the same thing with our actual manufacturing. So we're not particularly efficient. The other reason why these goods are so cheap is because they're undercutting. Undercutting in that they're even undercutting themselves. Like many of the tech companies that we've seen that have achieved remarkable market dominance, including things like the e-hailing services or like the co-working spaces or co-sharing of property spaces. We all know those sort of platforms. A lot of them have run at a loss-leading model. In other words, they're prepared to take on a loss in order to scoop up market share and drive other, which would have been market-efficient businesses out of the market. So we kind of being squeezed by both sides. On the one hand, you've got competitors with very deep pockets that are able to undercut market realities that you're simply not able to do in an economy like our own. On the other hand, we're not particularly competitive. And as your previous guest was saying, our competitive moats that our government has put in place to protect our inefficient, costly industries have a few leaks in them and a few loopholes. Now, of course, our local retailers could have exploited these loopholes too, but they didn't for various different reasons. But the reality is that people have spotted our weaknesses here in terms of efficiency, in terms of pricing, and in terms of price vulnerability, and are taking advantage of that to give our very budget-conscious consumers more of what they want. And that's, of course, the other reality. The middle classes, that's people earning around about 5,000 to 20,000 a month, they have 40% less purchasing power than they did in 2016. So people are definitely looking to save where they can, and it's going to be very hard to try to take that away from the consumer. So there's also the worker here in our country.
This is in a way globalization. Someone is going to spot an economy where people aren't, where there's a need, where there's a demand, and they're going to meet that demand, and they're going to do it very cheaply.
But yeah, if you can meet the demand better, you're going to scoop up that market share unless you've got anti-competitive moats that are put in place, which is what we've done with most of our industries. Whether you're looking at agriculture, whether you're looking at manufacturing, textiles in particular, we have very kind of almost regressive in a globalist kind of context policies, tax policies that essentially protect our local industries and allow us to operate at a less efficient scale than other places in the world in order to protect jobs, which is obviously a critical priority for our government in our particular context here. But at the same time, as I mentioned earlier, the laborer, the worker whose job is at risk is also the consumer who is budget conscious and wanting the best deal. So you kind of have a little bit of a conundrum there. And this is what makes economics and economic policy so difficult. Whose rights do you protect? The cash-strapped consumer or perhaps your local industry that you're really trying to grow? These are very difficult challenges to articulate and for policymakers to wrap their heads around in a fair way.
I mean, surely there's a point below which the price of clothes cannot fall. I mean, and we must be getting close to that point now.
Well, that's what I was saying. Like what these multinational companies are doing, spotting the weaknesses in our market, is they're prepared to actually sell those clothes at a loss. They're selling them for less than it's costing them to manufacture and ship in order to kind of squeeze the local competitors out of the marketplace who simply don't have those reserves. This is anti-competitive behavior, and this is the sort of behavior that we have regulations and tariffs and anti-competitive notes in place exactly in order to defend ourselves against. This can be seen almost as a form of economic warfare. If you're able to sort of sell things at a loss, that's an aggressive economic move towards another nation's economy.
Thank you very much indeed. Bronwyn Williams is a futurist, economist and a business trends analyst at Flux Trends. In a moment, where we'll hear from the workers, Simon Eppel is the head of research at the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union with SAFM, 10 minutes to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Just a reminder, the N1 coming out of Pretoria, all the backlog has moved through now, so the only bit of traffic you'll hit on your way to Joburg is between Old Joburg Road and Olifantsfontein Road, and that's about fairly standard for this time of morning. Going into Sandton, to crash on Grayston Drive at Linden. Now, that is causing a delay coming across from Wynberg on Grayston across the highway and down into Sandton. It's also now having an impact on the Mike 1 South coming through from Buccleuch and the N1 North from, or the Mike 1 North from Melrose. The highway both ways congested on those ramps because of the congestion on Grayston Drive. Maybe come off at Corlett Drive, come off at Marlborough Drive, and they might get through into Sandton a bit quicker. Still with the breakdown on the N3 North, getting up into Galulis. The vehicle, it's a side tipper truck, has been there all morning. N3 North linked to the N12 East inside the interchange. Traffic remains very heavily backed from the N12 Alberton area. Durban, things coming down out that way this morning. A little bit of traffic, though, between Pinetown and Spaghetti Junction through the roadworks that are in place near the Pavilion Mall area. And Cape Town's going to stay busy. Traffic levels were high and the speeds down this morning because of weather conditions. Still a bit misty and a bit of drizzle around Cape Town. The N1 from Belleville all the way through the city centre. N2 is backed up from the airport around a broken down bus coming inbound by Jan Smuts. And there's a lot of traffic on the N7 north out of Goodwood this morning. Queues up towards the N1 highway. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
8 minutes to 9. Continuing your mediated conversation around fast fashion. Simon Eppel is the Director of Research at the Southern African Clothing and Textile Workers Union, SACTU. Simon, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Stephen. Lovely to be with you, and good morning to your listeners.
So we see these international online retailers becoming stronger and stronger. What impact are they having on our clothing manufacturers?
Stephen, if I can quickly take a step back before I go there and just give a little bit of context, I think Bronwyn's done a really solid job at speaking to the almost economic warfare parts of this, the loss-leading strategies that are being used. Look, there's another one. There's been a number of really interesting reports over the last couple of years, many of the prestigious newspapers, other entities, etc., speaking to the kinds of suppliers that produce the goods for the likes of Shein and Temu. And, these are very often factories where there are allegations of forced labor, there's allegations of non-compliance in the supply chains in terms of, lower than the minimum wages in China, factories really off the radar, workers working 18-hour days, ending at 3 a.m. in the morning. And in fact, there's some really interesting anecdotes where even it seems where Shein has given up some of its worst suppliers, Temu has taken those on board. So I kind of just want to frame it with that quickly. You're getting absolutely almost impossible prices coming into a market, number one, through the choice of particular manufacturers who are not playing by the rules in their own country, and then the kind of export and import strategies that they're using, which are not playing by the rules either. Look, it's too soon to say what's going to happen, what is happening with Temu. It's only recently launched here, but you can see already the app usage. This is a highly, highly popular app. In the States, for example, it's eating the lunch of Shein, but it's eating the lunch of other big e-commerce platforms too. In terms of Shein itself, we are seeing the loss of market share by some of our major retailers. And what happens is as they lose their market share, so our manufacturers lose. Roughly 1 out of 3 garments in the country in our retailers, that's at an average level, roughly 1 out of 3 garments sold in our big retailers is made in South Africa. So the more products they don't sell, the more that go to the likes of Shein and Temu, the more we stand to lose in our factories. And that's exactly what's happening. So we've got a threat on jobs and factories. But the other factor that plays out is as these almost sort of predatory pricing strategies happen, it puts pressure on our own factories. And so you have a reciprocal response in the manufacturing industry of further downward pressure, further attempts to informalize the industry, further attempts almost to replicate the worst models of China in South Africa.
Okay, Simon, there's a lot going on there, and let me bring an argument very much from the right just to sort of look at that. You spoke about, that Chinese manufacturers don't necessarily play by the same rules. The argument could come that perhaps we institute the wrong rules. And I know plenty of employers who will say to me, well, the issue is that the Employment Act makes it harder to hire people, that maybe we need to compete with China. I realize, Simon, I'm putting this to you because I know you'll have a strong response to that.
Yeah, look, I will have a strong response to it, but it's almost not really that necessary. I mean, let me give the headline, which is, we've got a strong tradition of human rights in the country, which defends and advocates for treating people decently, and really is the bedrock for a set of principles in which we attempt to build our economy on the back of some level of decency. Wages in the clothing industry are horribly low. Neither you nor I nor any of your other guests could live off those wages. Whether or not, they feel they're too high, certainly none of the employers who would complain to you could live off those wages. And that's the kind of fact of it. Our wages are in many ways on par with many other countries, including low-cost manufacturing countries. It's just the nature of a global competitive world that one employer will complain to you that our wages are too high and we should really pay the same as Lesotho. In Lesotho, they're going to say, hey, we're too high, we must be the same as Madagascar. In Madagascar, they're going to say, hey, we're too high, we must be the same as Myanmar, where there's allegations of forced labor. That's just the nature of the beast. Our attempt is not to replicate the worst of the worst. Our attempt must be to try to develop our own capacity in the areas where we can, with the strengths that we can, using the various tools at our disposal, but surely not to kind of whip and beat our people to the extent that we want to be the worst.
A cause for government to intervene, in other words, to change the rules. And some of this seems to be, and I can't believe how big a factor this is, about how the consignment or the clothes are actually delivered to the country and the size of the shipment. In other words, if it's above a certain size or below a certain size, you pay a very different kind of duty. It's about the value of it. How could we change that? Would that work?
So at the moment, Stephen, we've got the equivalent of, I don't know if you know the old stories of the knocker-ups. 100 years ago or so, your alarm clock wasn't a device by your bed. It was a human who knocked on your window in some parts of the world. And our import rules on some of these matters, it's the de minimis rule. That's what one of your guests spoke about, certain goods under a certain threshold, and a gift rule. That's, your auntie used to send you something from overseas, a couple of times a year. Those rules are really antiquated. They don't meet the kind of needs and dynamics of a modern economy. Certainly, they never anticipated the likes of e-commerce. So we think there are spaces to do this. I mean, our call would be to get rid of the de minimis rules and the gift rules entirely, or have exemptions where we carve out that you can't use these rules for clothing and textiles. But I want to point to something. Clothing and textiles traditionally has always been like the canary in the coal mine. It's a warning of something coming in other sectors. We saw that in the 2000s when clothing and textiles struggled and other sectors looked on and said, oh, you're so uncompetitive. And then the likes of glass and plastics and tires and even cement started to struggle. What we're struggling with at the moment is going to happen in other sectors. In fact, one of your earlier guests spoke to the fact that Temu isn't just doing clothing. It's doing a whole range of things, electronics, tools, stationery, etc. And we need to be thinking really proactively about defending and advancing our entire economy. It's not just a clothing and textiles issue. We would start quite simply with amending the rules around de minimis and gifts, but then that can't be sufficient. There's got to be work on developing our local value chains, essentially bringing scale, volume, and value to our domestic economy. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Simon Eppel is the head of research at the South African Clothing and Textile Workers Union, runs their textile research unit. My thanks also to Bronwyn Williams, the trend translator at Flux Trends. Siphumelele Zondi is the presenter of Network and an expert here in the SABC News channel. And starting us off today, Nicola Cooper, the trend analyst and cultural strategist. Well, fast fashion, I hope you're kind of up to speed. Thinking of fast, there's going to be a lot of news moving through the day. As always, you'll hear all of that happening for you on SAFM. Don't forget preparations as well, of course, for the budget tomorrow. Kathy is next. We will see you tomorrow morning. It will be Wednesday morning, the day of the budget, and I think there'll be all sorts of conversations around where the Finance Minister is going to get the money from, what is going to happen, and how it will all play out in the economy. From Melissa, Mpop, Stanza, Mdu, myself, look after yourself. You're with SFM leading the conversation. It's 9 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thank you, Stephen. In your top stories, the DA looks ahead to declaration of cadre deployment as unlawful, and Gauteng Premier sets the date for final shutdown of e-tolls. This is SAFM News. A very good morning.